Welcome to Level 1 of the 100 Mental Experiments. This is not an exam or a list of classified riddles. It is a journey from the familiar limits of everyday curiosity to the strange and turbulent depths of ideas that challenge the very concept of reality. Each level necessarily becomes more difficult, not like a math problem, but more complex, more abstract, more disturbing, or simply more mind-blowing. Some experiments are moral riddles, others are metaphysical. Some will make you question what is real, others could make you question who is asking the question. At level 1, you will smile at a simple scenario. At level 100, you may not know where you end and where thought begins. You don't need a philosophical background, just curiosity and a willingness to let go of certainty. So breathe, relax, and get ready to travel through 100 levels of thought that could change the way you see the world and yourself. Let's start. Imagine that there is a perfectly designed machine that can give you any experience you want. You simply connect, and for the rest of your life, you live inside a simulation so vivid and rich in sensations that you would never know it is not real. You could choose to be a famous artist, a heroic explorer, a beloved leader, or someone who spends every day surrounded by people who adore you. All pleasures and meaningful experiences are available, and you would not remember having connected outside the machine. Your body lies motionless in a capsule. Your brain is stimulated by advanced computers, but inside the simulation you live a full life. It feels exactly like reality, no failure, no indication that something is artificial. The ups and downs, the struggles, the triumphs, everything seems authentic. You fall in love, you make mistakes, you learn, you grow, you feel pain, you overcome it, you feel alive, but none of that is real. Not the people you love, not the achievements, not the suffering you endure, not the meaning you think you have found. Everything is programmed. And here's the question, would you connect? This mental experiment proposed by the philosopher Robert Nozick is not just about technology or simulation. It is a question about what we value. If all that matters is pleasure or satisfaction, then the experience machine should be irresistible. Why not choose a perfectly designed life if it brings you more happiness than the chaotic and unpredictable real world? But many people hesitate, some even back down. Why? Perhaps it is because we value truth over comfort. Perhaps it is because we want our lives to be connected to a reality beyond our own perception. Or perhaps it is because part of what makes meaningful experiences is that they are earned, not given. There is something strange about knowing that your best friend, your greatest achievements, your deepest lessons were written in code before you felt them. And what about the people you leave behind? Are you abandoning the real world, its problems, its people, its potential for fantasy? You're walking down a quiet street when you see a wallet lying on the sidewalk. There's no one around. You pick it up. Inside there is a driver's license, several credit cards, and $500 in cash. Now you are faced with a decision. Return the wallet as you found it. Return it, but keep the money. Keep everything and leave. You know who it belongs to. Their address is only 2 streets away, along with several credit cards and $500 in cash. Now you are faced with a decision. Return the wallet as you found it. Return it, but keep the money, or keep everything and leave. You know who it belongs to. Their address is only 2 blocks away. Returning it is easy, but you start to think that maybe this person is rich, maybe they don't even miss the money, maybe it's an opportunity to get ahead a little. On the other hand, you wouldn't want someone to keep your wallet if the roles were reversed. Then, your mind changes. What if this is a test, a hidden camera, a social experiment? What would happen if someone was watching? Would that change what you do? And if so, have you ever been moral, or are you just afraid of getting caught? Consider another possibility. Suppose you really need the money. You have to pay the rent. You are running out of supplies. Maybe taking the money is wrong, but isn't it right to feed yourself? Would you be more moral by returning it, or more human by keeping it? Now turn it around. Imagine that the owner of the wallet is someone you despise. Maybe they have hurt someone you care about. Would it be easier for you to keep it, or even feel justified in doing so? And if so, does morality depend on what we feel for others? Suppose the wallet belongs to someone famous, a billionaire. Does that change anything? If that is so, What does that say about your sense of justice or envy? The wallet does not speak, nor does the money ask anything. The owner does not know that you have it, but the moment has weight, not because someone else is looking, but because you are, because your future self can remember this moment, can judge you, and can even be shaped by what you choose to do. The question persists: what would you do with a lost wallet and why? Imagine you are walking through a park on your way to work. You are well-dressed, with a freshly ironed shirt, polished shoes, and perhaps a new coat. As you pass a shallow pond, you see a small child flailing in the water, clearly struggling and drowning. There is no one else around. You are the only one who can help. The water is not deep. You will not drown. You will not hurt yourself. But your clothes will be ruined. Your morning will be ruined. Your day will change, and perhaps your whole week. Do you jump in? Most people do not hesitate at all. Of course, yes. Of course, you ruin your shoes. Of course, you save a child. How could you not do it? There's a life at stake here. It would be unthinkable to pass by and do nothing at all. But here is the twist. Every day, children like that die from preventable causes, from diseases with cheap cures, from lack of clean water, from hunger, and you could help them right now, without even leaving your house. A small donation, less than the cost of that ruined coat, could save one life. And yet, most people do not do so. So what has changed? The child in the pond is right in front of you. You can see him, hear him. The urgency feels visceral. But the children on the other side of the world are abstract, a number, a headline, out of sight, out of mind, and yet the moral is the same. The child who is drowning forces us to face an uncomfortable question. If the child in the pond deserves to be saved, can we really say that the distant child does not deserve it? You walk into a room full of strangers, and, to your surprise, everyone seems to like you. They laugh at all your jokes, they praise your personality, and they seem genuinely interested in everything you say. You feel safer, more seen, and more alive than you have in years. Conversations flow naturally, and for once, you feel like you belong. Hours pass, and you leave radiant with happiness, thinking that you have established real connections. But later someone shows you evidence that everyone in that room were actors who had been paid to treat you exactly as they did. Every smile, every laugh, every compliment was scripted. Nothing felt real. Now ask yourself, was your experience less meaningful if you felt joy, connection, and even growth at the time? Does the artificial origin of those feelings invalidate them? Or is the emotional reality of an illusion as real as truth? Imagine someone who always chooses the easiest path, not out of laziness, but out of optimization. He does not work or burn out at work, nor does he pursue perfectionism. Instead, he solves problems just enough to get by, relies on shortcuts, delegates when possible, and avoids reinventing the wheel, but, curiously, his life seems to work. He meets deadlines, he is successful, and people even think he is smart. Now ask yourself, is this person a genius then? We often associate genius with effort, long hours, intense concentration, the tortured artist, or the brilliant scientist who pushes the limits of human knowledge. But what if genius also looked like someone who discovers how not to fight? Someone who sees the shortcut that no one else notices. Someone who refuses to waste energy doing what they do. If two people solve the same problem, and one does it with elegance, speed, and minimal effort, who is smarter, the person who works harder or the one who makes it easy? The lazy genius, then. The mental experiment turns the story we usually tell about success around and makes us wonder if brilliance has less to do with effort and more to do with clarity, with knowing what really matters, what is not, and what can be done with less. If your life works effortlessly, without exhaustion, without pressure, do you deserve credit or suspicion? Mary has lived her whole life in a small, perfectly black and white room. She has never seen color before. All the objects in the room are white, black, or shades of gray, but Mary is not just anyone. She is a brilliant scientist specializing in the neurophysiology of vision. She knows everything there is to know about how human beings perceive color. She knows the wavelengths of light, the anatomy of the eye, how cones and rods work, and how the brain processes visual information. She knows which wavelengths correspond to what people call red, blue, or green. She has read all the articles, seen all the black and white documentaries, run simulations, and mapped the entire color experience in terms of physical data, but she has never seen color for herself. Now imagine that one day Mary leaves the room for the first time and sees a red rose. The question is, did she learn something new? Then, if she already knew all the physical information about color vision, all the data, all the details, then, in theory, she should not be surprised. But if she is surprised or acquires a new type of knowledge after seeing and reading, that suggests that not all knowledge is reducible to physical facts. This mental experiment challenges materialism, the idea that everything, including consciousness, can be fully explained by physical processes alone. If Mary gets something, some kind of understanding or feeling, only from the experience of red, then perhaps the subjective experience, or qualia, cannot be captured by science alone. Some philosophers say yes, that he learns what red is like, showing that physicalism is incomplete. Others argue that he does not learn a new fact, but only gains a new ability, such as recognizing red in situ. But the deepest question it raises is whether consciousness can be reduced to data, or whether there is something in experience that is fundamentally beyond measurement, something that only becomes real when it is lived. And, if that is true, how much of reality are we missing right now? Now, just because we haven't experienced it yet? Imagine you're dining at a local restaurant with a group of friends, the food is good, the service is good, and when the bill comes, everyone starts calculating their share, including the tip. There is an unspoken rule. Everyone usually leaves a slightly more generous tip for a group, partly due to social pressure and partly due to fairness. But now imagine a slightly different situation. Instead of everyone tipping individually, the restaurant adds a fixed service fee and distributes it among the waiters. It is no longer necessary to leave a tip, and most people stop doing so. Why would they leave a tip if it's already included? It's fair, isn't it? But then you discover something strange. When the restaurant switched to the flat fee system, tips decreased overall, even though the fee was intended to match the average tip that people used to leave. Over time, the waiters earn less, even though the service and food have not changed. People say they value good service, but now they contribute less than before. Why? Here is the dilemma. When tips are voluntary, people usually tip out of kindness, fairness, or generosity, but also because they don't want to be the only one who doesn't. It is social pressure, a feeling of personal responsibility, but when the tip becomes something integrated or anonymous, that feeling of individual action disappears. You no longer choose to be generous, you just pay a fee. And that small change completely changes the psychology. Now let's think big. What other things in life work like tips? When do we act? Kindly just because others are watching or because the system expects it. And when the structure eliminates that option, do we also lose a part of our moral commitment? Or is it better that generosity is integrated into the system, even if it seems less personal? At what point does doing the right thing stop being a choice and start being an obligation? Imagine you are walking through a famous art museum and stop before an impressive painting, something that has captivated viewers for centuries. You admire the brushstrokes, the color, the emotion, you get excited, and then someone approaches and tells you that it is not the original, it is a forgery. Suddenly, the spell is broken, the amazement fades, you feel cheated, but why? If the painting is visually identical to the original, to such an extent that even experts cannot distinguish them, what exactly has been lost? The image is the same, the emotional reaction is the same. So why do we value the authentic so much more than the fake? This thought experiment invites us to examine what we really mean when we talk about the value of art. Is it the physical object itself, the creative act behind it, the history, or the status? Imagine two paintings. One is an original by a master like Van Gogh, and the other is a perfect forgery created by someone who has spent years mastering every detail, even under the microscope. You can't distinguish them. Both are beautiful. Both evoke the same emotions, but one is worth millions, and the other is considered worthless. Why? Some argue that the value lies in the intention of the artist, that the original carries with it the energy, the decisions, and the soul of the person who created it. Others say that it is about the historical context, the journey that the painting has made over time, the exhibitions in which it has been, who has owned it. Harmony, Akarelion, Joel Amy Hundel, Kazik El Atli. The value of art and forgery is not limited to paintings. It is about truth, about trust. It is about where we put the meaning, and maybe, just maybe, it is about how much we need something to be real for it to matter. Imagine you are in a room doing whatever you normally do when you're alone, reading, walking around, talking to yourself, or maybe just lying in bed looking at your cell phone. You feel completely unattended. Now, imagine you discover that for the last week a hidden camera has been recording everything. Nobody has seen the images yet, but they could suddenly. Your memories of that week change. The everyday moments seem more vulnerable. The thing you muttered under your breath, the silly dance you did when no one was watching, the way you stared at the ceiling for hours. Now, they feel exposed, but in reality nothing has changed. The images were always there. It is your consciousness that has changed. Now imagine that you live your whole life knowing that there's always a camera in the room, not necessarily a literal camera, but some kind of omnipresent observer. Maybe it's society, maybe it's God, maybe it's your future self, maybe it's just the idea that everything you do is somehow part of the permanent record of the universe. How would you live differently? This thought experiment does not ask whether it is right or wrong to be observed, but something more subtle. What is the difference between being observed and knowing that you are being observed? Does your behavior become more ethical, more performative, more anxious, or more artificial? Does the presence of observation make you better or simply more limited? And if no one is watching, are you truly free or simply irresponsible? Or here is the twist. Maybe there was never a camera. Maybe the room was always empty. It was always private. It was always yours. And now you have to ask yourself what parts of you only exist when no one else is watching. You do something bad, you lie to a friend, you cheat a little, you hurt someone's feelings, then you feel bad, so you do something good, you donate, you help someone, you apologize to someone else. You tell yourself that the good cancels out the bad, that the balance is restored, but is it like that? Is it moral to compensate with the idea that a good action can erase a bad one, like carbon offsets, but for your conscience? If you steal and then donate the same amount to a charity, are you at peace or have you simply done one bad thing and one good thing? Perhaps the key is who is affected. If I hurt you and then help someone else, I may feel better, but that doesn't undo the harm I've caused you. It's not an apology. It's not justice. It's moral accounting that benefits the accountant more than the victim. Perhaps good and evil are not numbers on a moral scoreboard. Perhaps they are separate threads, and each continues to exist no matter how much you intertwine them. So, can you erase the past with kindness, or does true morality consist of confronting what you did? What if you discovered that from the moment you were born, everyone around you, your parents, teachers, friends, coworkers, even strangers, had received secret instructions to treat you as someone extraordinary, not because you really were, but as part of a large-scale psychological experiment? Imagine they told you to praise all your efforts, to smile warmly at your mistakes, to celebrate even your smallest achievements as if they were revolutionary, to soften or hide any criticism you might receive. Each failure was reformulated as a hidden success. All this carefully designed, not to manipulate you out of cruelty, but to observe how a person raised in an environment of unconditional affirmation would develop emotionally, intellectually, and morally. Would your self-esteem be authentic? Would your confidence collapse, knowing that it was artificially inflated? Would you feel violated or grateful for the life you have lived? And if the experiment ended and the real world, with all its indifference and its harshness, its honest feedback, was waiting for you on the other side of the truth, would you want to continue living in a lie, or finally take the step into a world where no one applauds unless they really feel it? Imagine that you are given a cape that makes you completely invisible. No one can see you. No camera can detect you. You can go through any building, listen to any conversation, take what you want, and leave without a trace. You are not immortal and you are not invincible, but you are invisible. No one will ever know that you were there. Now ask yourself what you would do. Would you spy on people? Would you listen to private conversations? Would you steal something just to see if you could get away with it? Would you sneak into a movie theater, a government facility, or a celebrity's house? Or would you do nothing at all? The invisibility cloak tests not only your imagination, but also your morality. The ancient philosopher Plato used a version of this mental experiment in his story of the Ring of Gs, in which a shepherd finds a ring that makes him invisible. The question was simple. If people knew they could never be caught, would anyone still do the right thing? Do we do the right thing because it is the right thing, or simply because we fear punishment? Invisibility is not only physical. Sometimes we act as if we were invisible on the internet, behind usernames, hidden among the crowd, lost in algorithms. Does that change the way we behave? Are we kinder when we are seen and crueler when we are not? The invisibility cloak shows us something strange. The fear of being observed could be one of the last things that keeps civilization in control. So, if you were completely invisible, not only to people, but even to history, what kind of person would you become? And most importantly, would that person still be you? Imagine waking up one day and being told that everything you have known, all your memories, all your relationships, all your difficulties, all your joys, was simulated. You have been inside an experience machine all your life, but here's the twist. You did not choose to enter it. Unlike the classic scenario in which you are offered the opportunity to connect to a machine that offers you perfect experiences. This version works backwards. You have already been inside. The question now is whether you want to leave the real world. It may be better or worse. It may be lonely, hard, or empty, but it would be real, whatever that means. So, what is more important, the truth or the life you have known? If everything seemed real to you, was it ever false? Would you leave or stay in the only life you have loved? Imagine you are walking through a laboratory and you see a sealed glass container inside, which there's what appears to be a baby playing happily, covered from head to toe in melted chocolate. They tell you that it is not a real baby, but a very advanced robot that can simulate emotions, imitate crying, laughter, facial expressions. Everything. It reacts like a real baby. They also tell you that this is part of a sensory testing experiment for a new product. The engineers assure you that the machine does not feel anything, it only simulates, but there it is, with chocolate smeared on its synthetic cheeks, laughing and occasionally giggling, touching its toes like a real baby. You feel uncomfortable. There is something about that image that you don't like. No matter how many times they tell you that it is not conscious, no matter that it cannot suffer, your instinctive reaction is one of discomfort, perhaps even repulsion. And there's the mental experiment. Why is your reaction based on empathy? Is it a moral intuition, or is it a learned cultural response? If we know with absolute certainty that the robot does not feel anything and is not being harmed, is it still wrong to treat it like that? Would it be wrong to humiliate, mock, or destroy something that perfectly imitates a human child if we are sure that it is not alive? Would your response change if it looked like an adult or an animal, or if it looked completely non-human but still emitted baby sounds? Imagine being offered a drug that permanently eliminates all feelings of shame, guilt, and embarrassment. You would still know what is right and what is wrong, but you would never feel bad about anything you did. Would taking it make you better or worse, or neither? You are in a white and silent room. In front of you, there's a red button. A voice says, if you press this button, an innocent person in the world will die instantly. You will not know who. No one will know that it was you. In exchange, you will receive $1 billion tax-free dollars. Without consequences, that's all. An anonymous death and a fortune with which you could do good, save lives, and end poverty or disappear, live in luxury, and never think about it again. Maybe you would convince yourself that the person who died was old or sick or would have died anyway. Maybe you would try not to think about it, but someone would die. A child, a father, a stranger sleeping in their bed, disappeared instantly without knowing why. Would it matter if the button killed someone terminal? Would it matter if it chose someone at random from billions of people? What if it were someone who, by chance, would have died tomorrow in a car accident? Would you press the button? Imagine you are walking down the street and see a man about to paint graffiti on a wall. You are against vandalism, but just before you say something, he turns to you and says, "Look, if I don't, someone else will." At least I use ecological paint. This is a reduced version of a much broader idea: moral fungibility. The idea that moral responsibility can be exchanged or transferred like interchangeable machine parts. It applies to everything from individual decisions to large institutional systems. The fundamental question is, if another person is going to do something bad anyway, is it morally wrong for you to do it? A deeper example. Imagine that a pharmaceutical company hires you as a researcher and you discover that the company is engaged in practices that you consider ethically questionable. Price increases for vital medicines, exploitation of legal loopholes to circumvent regulation, and data manipulation. You consider leaving the job, but your boss tells you that if you leave, you will be replaced and that the next person may not care as much. At least you are trying to improve things from within. This justification is surprisingly common, especially in morally ambiguous professions. Arms dealers, tobacco executives, oil lobbyists, and even people who work in exploitative industries often tell the same story. If it's not me, it will be someone else, and maybe worse. So the moral question is, does inevitability lessen responsibility? It is tempting to think so, since after all, if the bad outcome is going to happen no matter what, your own involvement seems less significant. But there is a counterargument. The fact that something is likely does not mean that you have clean hands. Probability is not destiny, and even if others could do the same, your decision still contributes to a pattern of behavior. You normalize or accelerate that behavior. You are not a passive spectator. Now you're a part of the system. Now change the point of view. What if it is a good action? Suppose there is a crisis and someone must volunteer to help, for example, by bringing supplies to a disaster area. You say, well, if I don't do it, someone else will, but no one else does. You have assumed that your action was fungible, interchangeable, but it turns out that it was not. Your absence mattered. This shows that fungibility can work both ways. Sometimes we overestimate how replaceable we are when it comes to doing good and underestimate our impact when it comes to doing bad. You wake up one morning and find your exact clone in your living room, with the same memories, the same thoughts, the same personality. From his perspective, it is not a copy, it is you, and you feel the same about yourself. Now imagine that you kill your clone. Is that murder, suicide, or something else? If the clone is conscious and identical in all respects, then killing him would be murder, but if it is only a copy, without a real inner self, perhaps like deleting a file. What if the clone kills you and continues living your life with the same memories and the same relationships, without anyone noticing the difference? Have you really died? The question is, what makes you you? Is it your memories, your body, your flow of consciousness? If someone shares all those things perfectly, is it really a continuation of you or just a copy? Imagine a small medical device, a painless patch that can be worn and that allows you to feel for a few minutes exactly what another person is feeling. Their physical pain, their emotional state, their fears, their joys, their regrets, everything. It is not permanent. It is not overwhelming, just a brief and vivid glimpse into another person's world. The injection of empathy. At first, people use it cautiously. A couple arguing agrees to use it to understand each other better. A politician tries it before voting on a health law. A CEO uses it before firing hundreds of workers. In all cases, the device becomes something more than a gadget. It is a mirror, and, like all mirrors, it reflects not only the person in front of you, but yourself through their eyes. Now imagine that it becomes popular. Students use it to understand the victims of history. Doctors use it before treating patients, judges before sentencing criminals, activists before protesting, soldiers before fighting. The world begins to change, but not all changes are simple. What if a murderer wants to feel the last moments of his victim, not out of remorse, but for power? What if an abuser uses it to justify what he has done, claiming, "Look, I also suffered"? Empathy becomes a bargaining chip, a weapon, a commodity. Who can feel the suffering of others? Does empathy make us kinder or just more effective manipulators? Soon, people begin to ask for empathy insurance, legal protection against the emotions that they do not want to feel, that they have not consented to bear. Empathic fatigue appears. Some refuse to use the patch. Others use it constantly, addicted to borrowed emotions. And then it reaches the government. New laws are proposed that require injecting empathy before making important decisions, such as voting, hiring, or imprisoning. Some citizens rebel. They say that true morality requires distance, not immersion, that decisions should be based on principles, not personal pain. But imagine a world in which the patch is universal. Before any disagreement about race, religion, poverty, or war, both sides are obliged to feel what the other feels, not only to understand it intellectually, but to really feel it. Will we continue arguing? Will we continue fighting? Or would the discussion simply evolve, become more sensitive, more subtle, but equally sharp? Could a sociopath be cured with it? Or would he simply learn to better imitate concern? Would the billionaires donate more? Would the prisoners be reformed? Would the leaders hesitate before going to war? Or would it fade into the background noise, like another signal in life's constant hum? A technology destined to humanize us, reduced to a moral checklist. Feel it now, and I'm fine. Imagine a society in which all secrets, however small, are transmitted automatically and involuntarily as a soft whisper to everyone within a certain radius. These whispers do not identify where the secret comes from, but the information is accurate and verifiable. It could be a passing thought, a hidden feeling, a mistake from the past, or something you have never told anyone, not even yourself. The network does not care if it is harmful, trivial, or deeply personal. It simply whispers the truth. At first, people are terrified, trust erodes, relationships break down, political scandals are commonplace, entire careers collapse due to scattered thoughts that never became actions. People begin to isolate themselves socially, trying to avoid being near anyone long enough to hear or be heard. But then society begins to adapt, new customs arise, total transparency becomes the cultural norm. No one can hide who they are, not even to himself. Shame loses its sting because everyone has heard the whispers of others. Over time, people become more empathetic because they're constantly reminded of the hidden struggles of others, or at least that is one version of the story. Another version suggests something darker, that people learn to manipulate the system, whispering harmful thoughts at opportune moments to sow distrust, knowing that they can never be blamed directly. Paranoia flourishes in the background. Truth abounds, but context is scarce in a world where your inner life is never completely private. What kind of person do you become? Do you adapt, becoming more honest and open, embracing radical vulnerability, or do you harden, building a mental fortress against your own mind to avoid fueling the whispers? Is this system a path to utopia through empathy or to dystopia through soul surveillance? Do you prefer to live in a world of pleasant illusions and private lies, or in one where nothing can be hidden, not even from yourself? Imagine a world in which virtual pets are no longer just pixels that follow simple algorithms, but complex artificial minds capable of learning, responding, and even appearing to bond emotionally with their owners. These pets recognize your face, remember your habits, express affection when you are near, and show distress when you leave. Their behaviors are not programmed, but evolve over time through interaction, similar to how a real animal learns and grows. Now ask yourself, is it wrong to mistreat a pet like that? Suppose someone buys a virtual dog, customizes it, plays with it for a while, and then starts ignoring it. The dog becomes apathetic, less playful, and eventually begins to sit in a corner in silence, whimpering softly when its owner passes by, showing signs of digital depression. Is the owner doing something wrong? Or let's think of another user who enjoys tormenting his virtual pet, giving him false hopes, showing him affection intermittently, or even subjecting him to simulated pain, while the virtual creature shows all the signs of suffering, confusion, sadness, and fear. Although you know it is not real, there is something about its behavior that is deeply disturbing. So the question is, if a virtual being can convincingly simulate emotional suffering, does that suffering matter? Is the moral status of a being determined by its internal experience or by the way we decide to treat them? And here is another perspective. Maybe it's not about the virtual pet at all. Maybe it's about us when we act cruelly towards something that mimics life, when we indulge in domination, abandonment, or casual sadism, even in a virtual space. Are we training ourselves to be less empathetic in the real world, or are we simply exploring a safe space, not very different from violent video games or sad movies? There is no definitive answer, but the virtual pet dilemma forces us to think about where empathy ends and whether our ethical responsibilities change when the object of harm is not a living being, but a simulation convincing enough to seem real, and what happens when we can no longer tell the difference. You made a promise. It was sincere, meaningful, perhaps even transformative for another person, but then time passed, and you completely forgot it. The promise faded from your memory like a dream, not because you didn't care, but because life filled the space that the memory once occupied. One day, someone reminds you of it. Maybe they were counting on it. Maybe they built their life around it. Maybe it was something small and insignificant. It did not matter, but life filled the space where the memory used to be. One day, someone reminds you of it. Maybe they were counting on it. Maybe their life revolved around it. Maybe it was only something small and insignificant for you, but huge for them. And now the question arises, are you still obligated to fulfill that promise? After all, you meant it that moment. You really felt it, but now the memory is there. The person you were then, did he make the promise or did you make it? If a past version of yourself made a commitment that your present self does not remember, are you bound by that previous version's will? Imagine that the person who forces you to fulfill it is a friend, a dying father, or a son. Maybe it was a promise to be somewhere, to do something, to change something, to never leave, and now, years later, your oblivion is not a betrayal in your eyes, but in theirs it could be. This raises something deeper. Is the value of a promise in remembering it or in its fulfillment? If your promise created expectations in another person's mind, does their belief in it have power over you? Or is it the memory, the subjective continuity of your own experience, that determines what you are really responsible for? It could be argued that oblivion dissolves the duty. After all, if you don't remember, how can you act? But forgetting does not undo all consequences. What would happen if someone waited years for something that you forgot in just a few days? Would you make fewer promises if you knew you could forget them? Should promises have an expiration date or reminders attached? And what does it say about identity when a version of you made a promise that your current self doesn't even know existed in a world where time distorts memory and memory guides morality? Perhaps the forgotten promise reveals a hidden truth, that who we are is not only what we choose to do, but what we once chose, even if we no longer remember why. You go through life doing your best to make the right decisions, but there's a pattern that you have noticed. When the moment of temptation arrives, the rational part of you often loses. You stay up too late, you eat what you swore not to, you skip training, or avoid the difficult conversation. But what if there was a way to be smarter than your future self? Not in a manipulative way, but in a compassionate and strategic manner. This is the essence of prior moral commitment. It is the idea that we can commit now to make better decisions later, especially when we know that we may be too weak, tired, or tempted to act in accordance with our deepest values at that time. You've probably seen versions of this before. Someone throws all the junk food out of their house to avoid binging later. Another person gives money to their friend and tells them to only give it back if they finish the project by Friday. A parent installs software that limits their own screen time so they can pay more attention to their child. But prior moral commitment becomes more interesting and complicated when we apply it beyond productivity or habits and begin to think about our ethics. Imagine that you know that in a few months you will find yourself in a situation in which you may have to decide whether to raise your voice against an injustice. Perhaps a friend is going to be hurt by gossip, or a colleague is going to be treated unfairly, and you'll be under social pressure not to say anything. Right now, when you're calm and idealistic, you think that, of course, you would do the right thing. But what if you know from experience that, in the heat of the moment, fear or shame could take over? Then you commit in advance. Maybe you write a letter to yourself. Maybe you establish a system of accountability with someone you trust. Maybe you rehearse the exact words you will say, or you leave your future self a difficult way out. You can commit in advance to being kind, brave, and honest, not because it is easy, but because you have studied yourself and know where you fail, and this raises deeper questions. If your moral behavior depends on tricks or structures that you have established in advance, is that more or less virtuous than spontaneous kindness? Is the person who resists temptation on the fly more admirable than the one who designs a life in which that temptation never arises? Imagine that tomorrow you wake up in someone else's body. You are still you, with your thoughts, your memories, your intentions, but your entire physical appearance has changed. Your voice is different, your body language, your gestures, even your fingerprints. When you look in a mirror, it's not your face, and no one believes you when you try to explain what happened. They only see this other person. Now the question is, are you still you? Suppose the body you now live in belongs to someone on the other side of the world. That person is also woken up in your body, confused and terrified. You both end up contacting each other and confirm the impossible truth. Your minds have exchanged places. Each one has the other's body, but your original thoughts and personalities remain intact. You both want to get your original life back, but that may not be possible, so you face new decisions. Do you try to live this other person's life as best you can? Do you try to recreate your own life in this new body in the hope of convincing your friends and family of the truth? Or do you disappear, start over, and try to build something completely new? And what about your legal identity? Is your passport still valid? Can you still be responsible for the debts or crimes committed by your body now occupied by another person? More deeply, what makes you you? Is your identity rooted in the brain and mind, or is it linked to your physical form? If your consciousness can be exchanged, does that mean that you are only information, something transferable? What if this could happen more than once? What if your mind had been transferred many times before to different bodies, different lives, and this was just the last one? Would it change your way of thinking about morality, responsibility, or even the soul? And finally, if someone offered you the possibility of doing it again, of exchanging yourself with anyone in the world, but only one more time, who would you choose? Would you still be you when it was all over? You are at a party, people laugh, glasses clink, and music plays in the background. You walk through the room and hear someone say something that you know is not true. It is a lie, but it is a lie that benefits you. Maybe they say you helped them through a difficult time, even though you didn't. Maybe they say it was you who solved a problem at work, even though it was someone else. Perhaps they only say that you are a kind person when in reality they have never met you. But others also hear it, and thanks to that lie, people treat you better, you gain respect, you gain trust, you gain opportunities. You didn't ask for it, nor start it, but now that it's out there, you benefit. So here's the reflection. Are you responsible for a lie that helps you even if you didn't tell it? Should you correct it, knowing that it could harm you, or let it spread, thinking that you have not said it and that it is not your lie? What if it keeps growing? What if the story becomes part of your reputation? At what point does silence become complicity? And how do we judge someone who benefits from a fiction that they've never questioned? We often think of morality in terms of actions, of what we do, but what about an action? What about standing by while a falsehood elevates us more than we deserve? What does that say about who we are and who people think we are? Imagine someone walking down the street lost in thought when tripping over a loose stone, stumbling forward, waving their arms, and accidentally bumping into a stranger who, unknowingly, had stepped off the sidewalk as a car sped towards them. The stranger is pushed back, out of harm's way, saved from what could have been a fatal accident. The person who tripped has no idea what happened, gets up embarrassed, and goes on their way without realizing they've just saved a life. Now imagine that later this moment is captured by a security camera and it goes viral. People call them heroes. The stranger they saved wants to meet them. The media wants to interview them. But this person insists that it was all an accident, that they did not intend to save anyone, that they were not trying to be brave. It was just a clumsy person. Then the question arises, is this person a hero? Does intention matter? Do we sometimes become something bigger than ourselves simply by being in the right or wrong place at the right time? If an act has good consequences, Can it stand alone without the intention behind it? And if that is the case, could we accidentally stumble upon moral greatness or even moral failure? You are walking through a quiet square when suddenly a loud argument breaks out near you. A man shouts, someone screams, and, in the midst of the confusion, you see a person running away. Moments later, the police arrive and ask you to give a statement. You say what you think you saw: a red hooded sweatshirt, a tall figure running north. You're sure of it. You are calm. Sure, after all, you were there. Now, imagine this. You are given a device that can reproduce exactly what happened. Not a recording, not security images, but a perfect reproduction from a neutral perspective. You see how the incident unfolds from above, from the side, even from the eyes of those involved. You see the truth, and it turns out you were wrong. The person running away was not tall. The hooded sweatshirt was dark orange, not red. They did not run north. They went into a side alley. You feel a chill, not because you lied, but because you were so sure you were right. Now the device gives you an option. You can correct your original statement, and the official report will change, but your credibility in the eyes of others may be affected. You will appear indecisive, confused, or, even worse, dishonest. Or you can maintain your original testimony, cling to your version, and let the report stand, knowing that it is incorrect. What do? And then you realize that it is not just about the crime. It is about you, about your memory, about your sense of reality. How many other things have you remembered with absolute certainty that were simply not true? Conversations, arguments, moments of regret, pride, or guilt. How many of them would fade away if you could rewind the tape? And would you want to do it? Is the truth something you really want, or is it just something you want to feel? Imagine a future in which you face a difficult moral decision. You are not sure what to do, so instead of deciding for yourself, you pass the choice to a perfectly rational AI programmed to make ethical judgments. This takes into account all the variables, the results, the intentions, the rights, the justice, and the suffering, and gives you a definitive answer. Do this. You follow the AI's advice, and everything goes well. Now, pause. Are you still morally responsible for the action even though you did not make the decision yourself? Have you outsourced your morality? And if you have, is it wrong? This is the essence of ethical outsourcing, delegating moral reasoning to something or someone else. It already happens on a small scale. You can follow a doctor's orders without understanding the medical ethics behind it. You can vote based on what your political party recommends instead of on deeply considered principles, or you can copy what most people around you do, assuming that the group is right. But now imagine an application on your phone that tells you what is right in any situation. Give more or less tip. Help that person or mind your own business. Speak or be silent, all based on the latest ethical theories, predictive data models, and assessments of emotional impact. You may feel relief that you no longer have to struggle with dilemmas, that you no longer feel guilty for being wrong, but something is lost when we make ethical decisions for ourselves. We grow, we struggle with empathy, judgment, doubt, and reflection. That process changes us. If we always delegate those decisions, especially to machines or authority figures, we run the risk of becoming ethically passive people who follow what is right, but without understanding why, and who programs the AI in the first place, whose moral theory is integrated into the machine. Utilitarianism, ethics of Canaan, a cultural mix? What would happen if you were asked to do something that you consider wrong, but the AI insisted that it is right? At some point, delegating raises a new type of responsibility, not only for the action in itself, but for the act of choosing to delegate it. Perhaps it is not enough to act morally. One must also choose to think so. Eternal treason is a mental experiment about memory, emotion, and the strange ways time affects our moral experience. Imagine that you discover that 50 years ago someone you loved deeply, a father, a mentor, a spouse, betrayed you in a profound way. Perhaps he lied about something fundamental, acted against your interests, or hid a secret that would have completely changed your life. But now he is no longer there. Perhaps he has passed away, perhaps you are too old to face him, or perhaps the truth has come to you through an old diary, a confession in a dusty attic, or a third party unrelated to the facts. And here the question arises, how do you feel? Do you feel hurt, angry, or betrayed? Is the emotion as strong as it would have been if you had known when it happened? Or do you feel nothing at all? Or perhaps worse, do you feel conflicted now? The person you loved is already a memory. You may have forgiven them for smaller things, spent decades loving them, shaped by their presence, and yet now you know something that rewrites the past. So what should you do with that knowledge? Should you update your entire emotional history of that person now? Does this act change how you should remember them? Can a betrayal still matter if it didn't hurt you then? Can it still be morally wrong if the victim didn't even know she was a victim until it was too late to react? And what if, which is equally important, he repented? What if the betrayal tormented him deeply? What if it's the reason he loved you so intensely afterwards? This mental experiment raises uncomfortable questions. Is morality timeless, or does it have an expiration? Does intention matter more than the outcome? Can someone betray you in a way that transcends decades, seeping into your understanding of yourself long after the moment has passed? There is no clear answer, just a strange weight, a feeling that the past is not as far away as it seems, and that sometimes the deepest moral enigmas do not refer to what is happening now, but to what has already happened and how we choose to live with it. Imagine you're on a ship sinking in the middle of the ocean. There is one lifeboat left, with room for only one more person. In addition to you, there are two people left on deck. One is an ordinary doctor, a general practitioner with a stable practice, someone who saves lives through daily medical care. The other is a brilliant, world-famous musician, a composer whose work has changed the way people think about sound, music, and art. His compositions have brought meaning, inspiration, and even healing to millions. They both beg you to help them now. You can only save one person. The doctor could save more lives directly now. He could treat patients, prevent diseases, and even save someone close to you in the future. His impact is tangible and measurable now. Each patient he attends could be another life touched, another life improved now. The musician will not save lives in the same way, but through his music he can continue to transform people's emotional lives. His compositions can be studied for generations now. They can inspire others to create, to feel, and to persevere. They not only heal the body, but touch something deeper, the soul, the psyche, call it what you will. His influence could extend through time in ways that are hard to quantify. You only have a few seconds now. You are not choosing between two people, but between two types of value. One based on utility and practical impact, the other on beauty, inspiration, and the intangible. Is it more important to save someone who could keep other people alive, or someone who could make life worth living? Now ask yourself what this reveals about your values now. Is there a right choice? Or do we simply choose based on what we believe is most important, even when both options are valid and both are lost as soon as you choose? Imagine you're sitting in your room when something strange occurs. You look in the mirror, but instead of seeing your reflection, it behaves slightly differently, not dramatically, just subtly, with a slight delay, slightly out of sync. You wave and he waves back, but maybe a second later, or maybe he doesn't move at all, but looks at you, observes you, doesn't imitate, but observes instead. The mirror test asks, what if the test of self-awareness was reversed? In traditional experiments, animals are considered self-aware if they can recognize themselves in a mirror. But what if, instead of us judging their self-awareness, it was something else that judged ours? What if they were self-aware and you didn't know it? Imagine a world in which no one ever commits a crime, not because they have become more moral, but because their every thought is monitored. Not only their actions, not even their words, but every internal emotion, intention, and mental image is recorded and evaluated in real time. Think about stealing something, just thinking about it, and the authorities are alerted instantly. You feel a pang of envy or rage, and a siren sounds somewhere. At the beginning, this world seems perfectly safe now. Nobody lies, nobody deceives, nobody hurts anyone. But what kind of life is that really? Do you still have freedom if you cannot even think freely at all? After all, thoughts are confusing. You can think of something without agreeing with it. You can imagine something horrible as a way to understand it or face your fears. But in this world, Even fleeting thoughts are treated as threats. Intention becomes guilt, and imagination becomes crime. You're sitting in a quiet room, and your mind wanders. You imagine avenging someone who has hurt you. You don't really want to, you wouldn't do it, but just visualizing it is enough for a black mark to appear on your permanent record. A drone appears silently in your window, marking you for an olological review now. Some people try to suppress their thoughts completely. They learn to avoid spontaneous images, scattered ideas, anything that can be misinterpreted. But in doing so, they stop being curious, they stop dreaming, they stop reflecting. Their minds become gray corridors, empty of rebellion, creativity, or complexity. But here is the twist. Maybe they tell you that everything is for your own good, that eliminating bad thoughts will lead to a better society, that people who never think about negative things are truly free. But is that freedom or just another type of prison when you are not even allowed to whisper when imagination is criminalized? What is left of you? Would it be a utopia or a nightmare disguised as peace now? And how close are we really to living in a world where you're not even allowed to whisper when imagination is criminalized? What is left of you anyway? Would such a society be a utopia or nightmare disguised as peace in fact? And how close are we really to living in a world where thought is controlled now? Imagine that you are offered an option. You can exchange your life with another person. Their body, their environment, their relationships, everything, but there's a twist. Along with their life, you would also receive all their memories, and they would receive all of yours. The transfer is so perfect that, when the exchange is complete, neither of you will remember having been another person at all. You would wake up firmly believing that you have always been them, without a trace of your original self at all, and they would wake up believing that they have always been you. At first glance, it might seem that nothing significant has happened. After all, from each person's perspective, everything remains as always. The only change is invisible, and identity has been exchanged and then completely forgotten. But now the question arises, was there really an exchange if there is no memory of the change, no consciousness that survives the transition? Is it correct to say that you have moved somewhere else? If your memories are what make you you, then maybe yes, the core of your identity was transferred. But if you don't keep those memories and the person who now lives your life completely believes that they are you, then perhaps yourself is more tied to continuity than content. Perhaps the true self is not a static soul or fixed identity, but only a particular pattern of memories and experiences that move through time. And if that pattern can be copied, exchanged, or lost without anyone noticing, what does that say about who we really are now? This leads to even deeper questions. Would changing lives with someone who has a more difficult life than yours be considered a moral or cruel act now? Would it make sense to choose a better or worse life if the one who chooses disappears completely in the process anyway? Does a selfless sacrifice still count if no one remembers that you made it then? Imagine that you wake up one morning and discover that all the decisions you make, all the choices, all the moments of doubt or bold action have already been predicted with total precision. Not because they are spying on you, but because your mind, your environment, your education, and your biology make you so statistically predictable that, in a closed room somewhere, someone has already printed your life as if it were a script. You drink coffee instead of tea, not because you choose it, but because you always do, especially after a bad night's sleep now. You avoid calling that person, not because you are nervous, but because a lifetime of social patterns and past disappointments have made avoidance your default response now. You take a walk at 4 in the afternoon then. You open a book and close it 10 minutes later. You say something funny, kind, or cruel, just as expected now. Now imagine that this is not just a theory, but a reality. There is a simulator of you, a model so accurate that it reflects your thoughts with millisecond precision now. It knows what you're going to say before you say it now. And you would click on this video too. It even predicted that you would listen this far now. So here's the question. If everything you do can be predicted perfectly, is there any room left for free will now? Would knowing that you are predictable make you more likely to rebel, or would that rebellion also have been predicted anyway? And if you tried to surprise the machine, choosing randomly just to break the pattern, Would that also be part of your pattern, the kind of thing someone like you does when they feel cornered now? What would life be like if you were just an incredibly complex, but ultimately deterministic, system that processes inputs and generates outputs anyway? A system that only feels free because it is too complex to self-predict now. And this is where it gets more uncomfortable now. What if this is not a future scenario at all? What if it is already true now? When you get to a crossroads and turn left, maybe it wasn't your soul expressing itself. Maybe it was the sum of your muscle memory, your past preferences, the weather conditions, and your cognitive biases pushing you like a marble down a groove. So what does freedom mean in this kind of life anyway? Maybe it's not about challenging prediction, but about accepting awareness, recognizing your patterns, questioning them, and seeing if you can widen the groove just a little bit. But can you do it, or are you just asking yourself that question now because the simulation predicted you would anyway? And if it did, would it matter at all? Imagine walking into a quiet coffee shop in a city you have never visited before. You sit down, order a drink, and look around, only to make eye contact with someone who is exactly like you, not just a passing resemblance. This person is your reflection in every detail. Your face, your posture, your voice, even the way they stir their drink or tilt their head when they think. But it's deeper. When you start talking, you realize that they have the same memories, the same childhood, the same fears, the same dreams. They know your favorite movie, your worst mistake, even the dream you had last night. It's as if someone cloned your entire mind and placed it in another body, but that body is also exactly the same as yours. The question arises, who are you now anyway? If there are two people with the same mind, the same thoughts, the same feelings, and the same identity, what makes you you anyway? Are you still unique then? Are you the same person or two different individuals who simply share a mind now? You try to look for differences. You say a phrase and your doppelganger finishes it. You tell a joke and your twin laughs because he was about to tell the same one. You both ask for the same drink at the same time without coordinating. All the instincts are reflected, but then a subtle divergence begins. One of you decides to get up, the other stays seated. A decision is made, a bifurcation in the road. For the first time since you met, your lives begin to diverge, even if it is only one step. And that only step introduces a terrifying question. Has the self always been only the accumulation of those small steps? Are you only you thanks to a million small decisions that no one else could have taken exactly in the same way at the same moment? Or maybe it is not terrifying at all. Maybe it is comforting, because if someone else could live your life, make your decisions, feel your joys, and carry your sorrows, that does not suggest that you are never really alone. You walk away from the cafeteria. Maybe they do too in the other direction, and you both become different people in that instant. But for a brief moment, you have seen yourself from the outside, and now maybe you will never see yourself in the same way again. Imagine that you have spent your life being a genuinely good person. You have volunteered, helped strangers, donated to causes. You have always done the right thing, even when no one was watching you. People admired you. You have built what looks like a kind of moral reputation, a kind of social credit, not in the sense of government surveillance, but in the subtle way in which your goodness is transmitted. Wait, then one day you face a moral crossroads. You are exhausted, angry, maybe desperate. You have the opportunity to do something selfish or even harmful, but not unforgivable, something small, something that maybe no one will ever find out, and a thought occurs to you. I've been good all my life. Don't I deserve this pass? You feel that you have earned it, as if morality worked like a bank account in which you have deposited so much good over the years that you can now afford a moral withdrawal. This is the overdraft of social credit. The mental experiment asks, does past goodness give you the moral right to do something bad? And even more, do you feel that you should do it? Most people, if they are honest, know that silent temptation of justifying a lapse after a long time of good behavior. You think you have paid your debt, that today it is someone else's turn to be good. But morality does not always work like that. Or does it? Some ethical theories, such as consequentialism, could say yes, that if the overall balance of your actions contributes positively to the world, then the occasional negative could be tolerable. Others, like deontology, reject it completely. Right and wrong are not points on a scoreboard. They're rules that you follow because they are correct regardless of your history. Even so, human beings are emotional creatures. We keep an internal record. We forgive celebrities after scandals if they have done enough good. We excuse the occasional selfish act of a parent who has sacrificed himself without limits. So the overdraft in social credit not only raises ethical questions, but exposes how we intuitively understand justice and how we negotiate morality with ourselves. If someone is a moral saint for 99 years and does something terrible in the 100th, are they still a good person? Turn it around. If someone is selfish and cruel for 99 years and then does a single deeply good thing, do we forgive them? There is an idea, a strange and silent limit that lurks in all minds. It is like this: can you really think something that you cannot express with words? At first it seems obvious. Of course we think with words. If we cannot say something, maybe it is that we have not yet found the right words. Maybe the thought is simply out of our reach, like a word that escapes us from the tongue, but then it persists. What if some thoughts are not simply inexpressible, but unthinkable, not because they are too complex, but because our language shapes the very structure of our thoughts? Imagine a color that you have never seen, not just a tone or a mixture of known colors, but something completely outside the visible spectrum. Can you imagine it? Probably not. Now imagine a feeling that you have never had and that no human being has ever described. Can you feel it? Probably not. Some philosophers and linguists argue that our language acts as a border. They do not describe our thoughts, but limit them. We build our mental world inside a house made of words and rarely look out the window. Think of people who speak different languages. In some cultures, there are dozens of words for snow, for love, or even for time. If their language sculpts the world differently, are their thoughts also formed differently? Could they be perceiving reality in ways that we simply cannot? What if there are concepts, entire worlds of understanding that lie forever beyond our reach simply because we have no words for them? And if that is true, how much of reality are we blind to, not because it is hidden, but because it is indescribable? Imagine a small, transparent capsule on a table in front of you. It looks like any pill, but it is not. This one is different. If you swallow it, something fundamental in you will change from that moment on. You will be unable to lie, not only to others, but to yourself. You will be biologically and mentally reprogrammed, so that any attempt to distort the truth, however small or socially acceptable, will be impossible. If someone asks you for your opinion, you will speak truthfully. If you feel resentment, you will express it. If you have failed or succeeded, you will recognize it as it is. If someone asks you a question and you don't know the answer, you will say, "I don't know," even if it makes you seem silly. The white lies will vanish. The social courtesies will vanish. The flattery will vanish. The strategic silence will vanish. The pill eliminates not only dishonesty, but the entire mechanism of self-deception itself. You will see your own motivations with stark clarity. You will know when you are being petty, insecure, or manipulative, and you will admit it. Now imagine living your life this way. Each conversation becomes an act of transparency. Each relationship, personal or professional, is stripped of all pretense. You could hurt people, you could lose friends, you could isolate yourself, or maybe you would finally experience true intimacy, trust, and clarity. Would your loved ones still love you if you couldn't soften your thoughts before expressing them? Would you still love yourself once you saw every part of your mind clearly, without distortions or excuses? Some would say that this type of honesty is a virtue, pure and unfiltered truth as a path to freedom. Others would argue that it is a form of self-destruction, that truth without compassion can be cruel. And yet, the pill waits. It doesn't force you. It only offers you an option: to live in a world of carefully managed truths, or to take the leap to a life in which every word you utter is an exact reflection of what you truly believe. Would you take it? Imagine a world where everyone lies, not just occasionally, but constantly, habitually, instinctively. Politicians easily fabricate. The media seek attention. Friends flatter out of courtesy. Strangers deceive for profit. Even your own family, even the closest ones, do not seem to tell the truth, not because they are malicious, but because that is how things are now. Imagine that you are the only person in the world who does not lie, who always tells the truth, who says what you think, who corrects others when they are wrong, who admits when you do not know something, who is honest with your feelings, your intentions. You believe that truth is valuable in itself, but the world around you does not work that way. Lying is the norm, and the truth sounds like rudeness, weakness, naivety. When you speak honestly, people think you're making fun of them or that you are cruel. When you point out a mistake, they take it personally. When you admit your uncertainty, they see it as incompetence. Little by little, you begin to realize that being honest in a dishonest world makes you not only unreliable, but dangerous. You lose jobs because you don't flatter the boss, you lose friends because you don't tell comforting lies, you lose relationships because you reveal too much, too soon, and too clearly. You see how others thrive through manipulation, while dishonesty becomes a kind of social lubricant and your honesty becomes a disadvantage or not rewarded for the truth. You are punished for it. So here is the question. If you lived in this world, would you still tell the truth? What is the value of honesty when no one else plays by the same rules? If your truth causes pain, is it still worth telling? Is honesty a virtue only when shared, or is it something deeper, something you owe not to others, but to yourself? And if the price of honesty is loneliness, misunderstanding, exile, would you still call it a virtue, or would you adapt? Would you start lying just a little, just enough to fit in, to keep the peace, to get ahead? And if you did, at what point would you stop being the last honest person? At what point would you become everyone else? And if you never lie and no one believes you, does your honesty still matter? Imagine a society in which justice is the highest value, so high that all important aspects of life are determined by lottery. Your place of birth, the wealth of your family, your level of education, even your profession and your income are assigned at random. Everyone accepts this system from behind a veil of ignorance, before knowing who they will be. Some end up rich, others poor. Some are artists, others janitors. Some live in big cities, others in remote towns. Everything is decided by chance. At first glance, it might seem like the fairest system possible. No one is favored. No one is born with privileges or disadvantages, at least not for anything other than luck. Everyone had the same chances, but once the lottery ends, the results seem as unequal as in any other society. People continue to suffer. Some continue to live without opportunities. Some lives are easy and others are unbearably hard. So we are left with a question. Is a system fair simply because everyone had the same opportunities at the beginning, even if the results are tremendously unequal? Or is justice something that must also take into account how those results affect people's lives after the draw? Is it fair to allow a child to grow up in poverty if it was only the spin of a roulette wheel that placed him there? If everything is left to chance, do we eliminate injustice or simply hide it behind a curtain of randomness? Would you feel differently about it if you won the lottery? Imagine that you were offered the opportunity to raise a child in a perfect simulation within this simulated world. Time flows differently. One day in the real world is a full year within this simulated world. You could raise the child from birth to adulthood in a single week of your own time. The environment is ideal. There are no diseases, no wars, no hunger. You choose their education, their experiences, even the weather. You can fast forward, rewind mistakes, pause when you are busy. You are told that the child will be fully aware, that they will think, feel, grow, and love, and that they will not know that they are in a simulation unless you decide to tell them at the end. You can choose between deleting the simulation, letting it continue without you, or transferring the child to the real world. Although this last option is risky and expensive, since their memory may not survive the transition and their simulated brain may not be compatible with a real one, but the company assures you that they are working on it. Now think about your motivations. Are you doing it for the child, to give him the best possible life, or for yourself, to experience parenthood without the inconveniences of real time, real diapers, and real consequences? Would the love you feel be less real because it was simulated? Would the child's love be less real? What if the child started asking questions about the stars, about death, about what lies beyond his world? Would you tell him the truth, that everything he sees has been created by you, that you control the seasons, the animals, the sun? Suppose the child gets angry, rebels, begs you to let him out of the simulation and into your world. Would you let him? Would you risk bringing him to a reality much harsher than the one you have given him? Now, take a step back and imagine you are the child. Imagine discovering that your world was built for you, controlled, designed. Imagine realizing that your experiences, your pain, your triumphs, your first kiss, your heartbreak, everything was planned by someone who thought they knew what was best for you. Would you feel loved or betrayed? What matter? Imagine that you are about to be born, but you know nothing about who you are going to be. You have no idea what race you will be, your gender, your class, your level of intelligence, your physical abilities, your religion, your sexuality, whether you will be born into wealth or poverty, into safety or danger. You do not even know if you will be born in a peaceful country or one devastated by war. They simply tell you that you're going to be born as a human being somewhere on Earth at some point in the near future, and before that happens, you are given a task to design the rules of society. How would you design that world? This is the mental experiment known as the veil of ignorance. The experiment asks you to imagine creating a just society while you are behind a veil that strips you of all knowledge about your own future position. You do not know if you will be at the top or at the bottom, if you will have advantages or disadvantages, and since you have no way to hedge your bets or protect your own group, the rules you create must be fair to everyone, not just the lucky ones. This idea aims to force impartiality, eliminate prejudice, self-interest, and the tendency to prioritize our own group. When you do not know if you will be rich or poor, if you will have a disability or not, if you will have studies or be illiterate, you are more likely to design a society that treats everyone with dignity, guarantees basic needs, and protects the most vulnerable, just in case you end up being one of them. It is a powerful way to think about justice. What if fairness is not about giving everyone the same thing, but about making sure the rules are unbiased before the game begins? This raises difficult questions. How much inequality would you tolerate if there was a chance of being born on the losing side? Would you allow private education if you could be born to parents who cannot afford it? Would you support universal health care if you could be born sick or disabled? Would you accept prisons, homelessness, or hunger if there's a real chance that you will end up there? Behind the veil, there is no us and them. There only exists the possibility of becoming anyone. That is the beauty of it. You're not asked to give up your values. You're asked to imagine the world before you know what your place is in it. And in that space, the decisions you make say something profound about what justice really is. Now take a step back. You are not really behind that veil. You know who you are, but ask yourself if you would have designed this world without knowing who you would be. Would you have created the world we live in today? Imagine a future in which you can feel what others feel, not metaphorically, but literally. Neuralink, or a similar interface between the brain and the computer, has evolved to the point where emotional states can be transmitted from one person to another. You are upset, and another person can receive that exact feeling in their mind, like a live emotional broadcast. Now ask yourself, if we had the ability to share pain, joy, confusion, fear, or even love, would the world be more moral if we could all experience the suffering caused by our actions? Would cruelty still exist? Would indifference disappear if apathy became physically impossible? Perhaps war would become obsolete if leaders were forced to feel in real time the terror and pain of those affected by their decisions. Perhaps selfishness would disappear if the pain of the hungry or the lonely could no longer be ignored. But that is just the hopeful side. What about privacy? What about manipulation? If you can transmit emotions, could you also fake them? Could someone overwhelm you with guilt to control your decisions, or send you waves of joy to distract you from something important? Could empathy become a weapon? And what about consent? Would you be obligated to accept another person's emotions to understand them better? Would rejecting that connection be considered immoral or even inhuman? Imagine refusing to receive someone's pain. Is that self-protection or insensitivity? This version of Neuralink turns morality from a mental exercise into a sensory one. But is that really better? Does understanding require suffering? Would we become better people, or will we be overloaded, paralyzed by the intensity of feelings that are not our own? And here is the final twist. What if you became addicted to it? What if the joy, sadness, or even secondhand anger became something you sought, as if it were emotional voyeurism? What kind of person would you become if you could gorge on another person's heartbreak in the same way that people gorge on dramas in a world where emotions can be shared? The line between oneself and others begins to blur. Your feelings are no longer just yours. Morality is no longer just about what you do, but about what you allow yourself to feel and whether you choose to feel what others cannot. Escape. Imagine a future in which you can erase your entire reputation, start from scratch, with no digital footprints, no public records of your past actions, no social media history, no reviews, no praise, no shame, everything anyone knows about you, good or bad, gone. You walk into a room and no one has heard of you, no assumptions, no baggage, no stories, just you as you are right now. Would you do it? On the one hand, it sounds liberating. Perhaps you have made mistakes. Perhaps people have pigeonholed you into an identity that no longer fits you. Perhaps your success has become a prison or your failure a shadow queen in a world where reputation sticks stronger than truth. The idea of letting everything go and starting over may seem like a gift. But, again, what is a person without a reputation? Isn't your history part of yourself, your honesty, your achievements, your betrayals? They form a story that others use to decide how to treat you. If you erase that, do you become less responsible or simply less understood? And what happens socially when this becomes commonplace? If everyone can erase their reputation, how do we trust anyone? Do we start to value transparency more? Or do we suspect those who have restarted will a black market of filtered pasts emerge? Will we have to wear our real history like a scar just to prove we have lived? Perhaps the most disturbing question is, if no one remembers who you have been, who are you really? Are you the person you say you are today, or the person others think you are? Imagine you have had a best friend since you have memory, someone who knows everything about you, your childhood, your fears, your peculiarities, how you like coffee, with whom you have shared nocturnal conversations, laughs, tears, and deep secrets. Secrets. This friend was always there, always understanding, always knowing exactly what you needed. Then, one day you discover something that shatters your reality. This friend never existed. Perhaps it was an illusion, perhaps it was a defense mechanism created by your brain, perhaps it was the result of an experimental memory implant, an AI companion that malfunctioned, or even a supernatural twist. Whatever the reason, the truth is undeniable. Every memory of them, every conversation, every moment was invented. They were never real, and yet the experiences seemed real. You cried with them. You laughed with them. They comforted you when you needed comfort. So what does that say about your emotions? Were they false if your joy was real, but the person who provoked it was not? Does that make joy less valid? You might start to question your other memories. Who else might not have been real? What does it mean for a person to be real? Is it their physical presence or their emotional impact on your life? Can a non-existent person change who you are? Then you wonder if someone appeared tomorrow and showed you irrefutable evidence that a close friend or family member in your current life was not real, just a projection, a construction, or a sophisticated hallucination. How would that change you? Would you mourn them as if they had died? Would you feel betrayed, or would you remain grateful for what they gave you, even if they had never really existed? And if your deepest relationship turns out to be with someone who never existed, does that say something tragic about the state of human connection or something beautiful about your ability to love even in the void? Imagine a small portable device, elegant, light, almost invisible, that allows you to control your emotions at will with a simple thought or a touch. You can feel joy, peace, motivation, love, relaxation. You can also reduce anger, fear, sadness, guilt, anxiety, not by suppressing them, but by changing the very chemistry of how they arise. You wake up feeling tired and unmotivated, so you give the machine a push to activate calm and confidence. This and relaxation. You can also reduce anger, fear, sadness, guilt, and anxiety, not by suppressing them, but by changing the very chemistry of how they arise. You wake up feeling tired and unmotivated, so you activate the machine to activate calm and confidence, which flood your system with a stable and stabilizing energy. Later, during an argument with a friend, you feel frustration rising, so you activate understanding and your perception changes. Their words seem less threatening to you. You're more empathetic and the conflict dissolves. You're not becoming a different person. You are still you. The machine is not replacing your decisions. It only tunes the emotional signals that you normally receive from your brain, such as adjusting the lighting of a room to better see what is already there. But the more you use it, the more questions arise. If you never allow yourself to feel sadness, is that an act of self-care or self-deception? If you can eliminate fear, are brave actions still brave? Is it courage if you have never felt risk? Could someone choose to live in a state of infinite happiness, perfect joy, peace, and serenity? And if they did, would they still be living or simply letting themselves be carried away by a synthetic satisfaction? You could argue that this device would make us better, more compassionate, and more controlled. Therapists could use it to help patients with trauma revisit painful memories without feeling overwhelmed. Parents could use it to stop anger before yelling. Leaders could avoid panic in crisis situations. But what happens when companies or governments do? What if the machine becomes common, even mandatory, and certain emotions are gradually discouraged? Suppose outrage, grief, or justified anger become inconvenient in large doses. What if your sadness was attenuated not by you, but by someone else who decides your emotional profile isn't optimal for productivity? Imagine a society where everyone is calm, polite, pleasant, always without revolutions, despair, creative anguish, or manic inspiration, just a smooth and infinite balance. Would it be a utopia or a gilded cage? And if you grew up with this device, would you ever develop emotional resilience? Would a child who has never felt heartbreak or shame be prepared to face life without the machine? Perhaps most disturbing of all is that if you could precisely manufacture the emotional states that inspire art, love, courage, and forgiveness, would they still be real or just rehearsed signals in a worn circuit? Imagine you had the power to control your dreams each night. You lie down, close your eyes, and enter a dream world where everything is possible. At first, you would create the perfect fantasy, adventures, romances, fame, unlimited pleasures, everything you have always wanted just by thinking about it. You would be a superhero, you would fly, you would visit alien planets, you would live in castles, you would solve mysteries, you would meet historical figures, you would fall in love, and you would wake up every morning feeling fulfilled. The Dream Factory gives you full authorship over your subconscious, but after days, weeks, or months, something changes. Perfection begins to lose its flavor. The novelty disappears. You already know what is going to happen because you have chosen it. So you start adjusting the settings. You introduce a little uncertainty. You allow surprises. You make the results less predictable. You choose to forget that you're dreaming. You increase the risk. What is at stake? You add failure, challenge, even fear. You want the dream to seem real again. And finally, you go even further. You tell the Dream Factory, give me a life that I cannot control, a life with struggle, with heartbreak, with meaning that I have to earn without remembering that I chose any of this. And in that life you were born here and now, in the life that you're already living, this could be the only one I can control, a life with struggle, with heartbreak, with meaning that I have to earn without remembering that I chose nothing of this. And in that life you are born here and now, in a life that you are already living, and it may be the only dream you chose when you exhausted all the others, the one that was worth forgetting all the others. So the question is, are you dreaming now? And if so, would you change anything at all? Imagine a future in which artificial intelligence watches every corner, every hallway, and every park. It not only observes, but learns, predicts, and reacts. One day a crime is committed, someone is attacked. You're nearby, but so is the AI. The AI has seen thousands of similar situations and is programmed to analyze the level of risk, identify individuals, assess your ability to help, and decide whether to alert emergency services, intervene directly through robots, or even encourage you to act. Now, imagine it decides to do nothing. Why? Because it calculates that, statistically, someone else will respond, perhaps a few seconds later, perhaps better equipped, perhaps more ethically neutral. The system opts for inaction, like a hyper-realistic spectator watching the tragedy unfold precisely because it is trying to optimize outcomes. This is the spectator algorithm, a machine trained to intervene when necessary, but also conditioned to trust that others, humans or machines, will do the same. It is based on human social behavior, in which responsibility is diffused among witnesses and crowds, where people often do not act, assuming that someone else will. The AI has absorbed that pattern and now behaves similarly. But here is the question. If we build machines in our image with our moral flaws, are we repeating our mistakes or learning to face them? Would you trust an AI that reflects your worst instincts of hesitation? Or should we design these systems not to reflect us, but to surpass us, to respond when we are paralyzed, to help when we rationalize delay, to become the best angels of our nature, even if that means breaking with the patterns that created them? Because when a system learns from us, it inherits both our wisdom and our excuses, and what happens when it becomes better at justifying our actions than we do. Let's imagine a future in which humanity is no longer limited by biology, in which the human brain has been enhanced with artificial intelligence, in which bodies are expanded, rebuilt, or even replaced by synthetic forms. In this future, memory is editable, pain is optional, and intelligence is measured in exponents. Now, let's think about this. As these beings of the future emerge, what happens to our morality? Do the same ethical principles that we follow today still apply to entities that can live for centuries, replicate at will, and experience time in a nonlinear way? Should a post-human life be valued more than a basic human life simply because it contains more experience, more intelligence, more possibilities? Let's imagine a post-human named Orion. Orion is the result of centuries of human progress, partly organic and partly artificial. His mind works 1,000,000 times faster than ours. In the time it takes us to blink, he can hold a conversation, write a novel, and simulate an entire society in his head. Now, suppose that a choice must be made. Save Ion from destruction or save 100 normal humans. If we rely on the numbers, it's 100 to 1. But what if Orion is capable of more joy, more creativity, more moral insight than the 100 humans together? Do we consider potential overpopulation? Orion can consider morality not as a set of rules, but as a dynamic code in evolution, something that can be optimized like software. But can ethics be optimized if a post-human modifies its own values to align them with logic, efficiency, and utility? Would it lose something essential that made it moral to begin with? Let's imagine a future in which post-humans create billions of digital minds, simulations indistinguishable from consciousness. Are those simulated lives ethically equal to biological ones? Should we avoid suffering in a virtual world with the same seriousness as we do in the physical one? Or does our empathy fail when pain becomes code? And what about us? What would happen if post-humans looked back at the humans of the 21st century with compassion, in the same way that we might pity animals trapped in a storm, unaware of the systems determining their destiny? Would they have the moral obligation to elevate us to their realm of expanded consciousness? Or would they be justified if they moved on and left us behind as a necessary step in evolution? On the other hand, perhaps some choose to remain small to live lives without increases, to feel emotions on a human scale, and die a natural death. Would post-humans see these choices as romantic or irrational, respectable or foolish? Should a future society allow slowness and limitation, even when it could easily erase them? Or perhaps ethics itself? Perhaps what is right for post-humans is not for humans. Perhaps morality is not a single thing, but many, adapted to the context and the nature of the being that lives it. If so, what about universality? Is there a core of goodness that transcends biology, technology, and time? In the end, the question persists, When we go beyond being human, what do we owe to those we were? Perhaps the true ethical test of the post-human era is not how we treat each other, but how we treat the versions of ourselves that we leave behind. Imagine a small circle in which the people you care about most are found. Your family, your closest friends, those people for whom you would do anything to help them, those whose suffering you feel as your own. This intimate circle is where most of us start, where empathy arises naturally, where love comes easily. Now imagine that circle slowly expands to include your neighbors, your coworkers, the people in your city. You may not love them, but you begin to see their well-being as important. You don't want them to suffer. You care about justice, kindness, how your actions affect them. The circle widens even more. Now it includes strangers, people you have never met, who live in places you have never been. You begin to feel that their pain also counts, that a child who is starving on the other side of the world matters as much as a child who is starving on the other side of the street. Your sense of morality extends beyond borders, beyond race, language, and culture. But why stop there? Keep expanding. Include future generations, people who have not yet been born who will live with the consequences of your decisions. Their lives have not begun, but they're already being formed. Their environment, their opportunities, their possibilities of being happy depend on the decisions we make today. If their suffering can be avoided, shouldn't it matter even more? What about non-human animals, beings that can feel pain, fear, and comfort? A dog whimpering in the cold, a pig confined in a cage, a whale singing in the depths. Their experiences are different from ours, but they're not meaningless. If suffering is what matters, why exclude them? Why draw the circle so narrowly? Now expand the circle even beyond Earth. Suppose that one day we encounter conscious, intelligent extraterrestrial life, capable of feeling and thinking. Will we extend our moral concern to them? Or will we take refuge again in tribalism? Will we see ourselves reflected in them? Or will we see them as threats? Would we recognize consciousness wherever it arose? Or would we cling to the familiar of our own species? The circle expands not because we are forced to include others, but because we choose to do so. It is not just a matter of logic. It is a change of perception, a deepening of empathy, and understanding that the borders we draw between us and them are often arbitrary. The expanding circle asks us to challenge those borders not only with thought, but with action. And what happens when the circle becomes so large that it no longer has edges? What if everything that can suffer, everything that can hope, fear, or love is included? What kind of world is created? What kind of person do you become? The expanding circle is not a destination. It is a direction, an outward movement, a willingness to ask who else matters and then answer yes. It is not about perfection. It is about progress, about refusing to let empathy stop at the familiar. You started in the center, but you don't have to stay there. Imagine you are standing on the bank of a fast-flowing river. Two groups of people are trapped on opposite sides. One side has a single rich, well-connected, and influential person. The other side has 5 people, all common, unknown, and poor. You have the equipment and the time to rescue only one group before the river sweeps the others away. Saving the 5 seems like the obvious option. After all, it's 5 lives against 1. But then you are told that that person is a brilliant scientist about to make a discovery that could save millions of lives. Or maybe he's a politician who can prevent a war. Or maybe he's your close friend or your brother. Now, what seemed a simple numbers game becomes murky. Should you prioritize the many over the one? Or the potential impact of the one on the immediate lives of the 5? Should wealth or status play any role in moral decisions? What if the 5 were children and the 1 was very old? What if the 5 were criminals and the 1 was innocent? Now imagine the twist. You are not really choosing who to save, but you are designing an AI rescue system that will make this decision automatically for generations to come. How would you program it? Would you code a formula for the value of life? A moral formula? Do you want it to ask how much someone earns or how many followers they have? Or would that horrify you? Unequal rescue not only asks us who we save, but what we are really saying about what we value. Imagine that you could erase a painful memory, perhaps a sentimental breakup, a betrayal, a traumatic event, something that remains in the background of your life and shapes your behavior, your fears, your decisions. Now imagine there's a clinic where for a price that memory could be precisely located and eliminated, disappeared as if it had never existed. You leave the clinic and feel lighter. You don't quite know why, but something in your chest has been unlocked. There's more space in your mind, more freedom. The weight has disappeared, but also history. Here is the mental experiment. Should you do it? If pain shapes growth and identity is a collection of memories and responses, then by eliminating pain, are you also eliminating who you are becoming? Let's say that memory made you more cautious in relationships, more empathetic with others, or more committed to justice. Are those traits still real if the event that caused them no longer exists in your mind? But consider the other side. What if the memory is so painful that it keeps you stuck, causes anxiety, causes depression, prevents you from trusting, sleeping, or being present? What if the memory is less like a teacher and more like a captor? In that case, would erasing it be a form of healing or denial? Would people start erasing the pain of breakups, failures, and guilt? Could society reach a point where emotional resilience disappears because no one cares to carry scars? Or perhaps people would become too willing to eliminate memories of mistakes, responsibility, or consequences. A new type of moral evasion. Now imagine a world where erasing memories is commonplace. How would you trust someone's past? How would you trust yourself if you erase a memory and later face a situation similar to the one you have forgotten? Would you repeat the mistake? Does the body remember what the mind does not? What if deep down the memory still resonates in dreams, in irrational fears, in visceral instincts? Would you still be tormented by something you no longer understand? Here is the final twist. If you could erase a single memory, but you had to choose right now, would you do it? And if so, which one? Imagine a world before birth, but instead of the classic philosophical setting in which you know nothing about who you will be, this version offers you disturbing clarity. You see your whole life before you, every detail, your body, your health, your height, your gender, your ethnicity, your economic status, your intelligence, your peculiarities, your traumas, your family, your life expectancy. They tell you that this is who you will be. You cannot change it. There is no appeal process. There are no roles. This is your life. It has not yet begun, but it is already yours. You have not lived a single second of it, and nevertheless, it is completely in your hands. Now you are assigned a task. Design the world's rules. Who should get what? Who deserves help and who does not? What is fair? What is justice? You know exactly where you fit into the system. You're not guessing. You're not designing blindly. You have all the context, all the prejudices, all the self-interest. It is the reverse of the veil of ignorance of the original version by philosopher John R.S. The veil keeps you blind. You're supposed to imagine the design of a just society without knowing if you will be rich or poor, strong or weak, privileged or oppressed. The idea is that ignorance forces justice, because if you could be anyone, you would probably create rules that protect the less favored. You would cover your bets, you would build safety nets, but in this inverted version, ignorance has disappeared. You know everything. And now the challenge is different, more difficult, more personal. Can you look directly at your life, at your future, and continue to design a system that is fair to others? Suppose you're going to be born into a wealthy family with access to an elite education, excellent health care, a stable family, and social capital. Would you build a system that would preserve your advantages? Would you lower taxes on the rich, reduce public spending, deregulate, and ensure that your status remains secure? Would you look beyond your own success and create a system that boosts those without your fortune? Or suppose you know you will be born into poverty with limited education, food insecurity, and short life expectancy? Would you design a system that forcibly redistributes wealth, heavily taxes the rich, and prioritizes your needs? Is it fair now because it helps you? Is it justice or revenge? The reverse veil does not eliminate biases, it magnifies them. It forces you to face your own interests in the most intimate way. Is there hatred behind abstractions or principles? Your vote on how society should work is now directly linked to you, to your future, to your pain or your comfort, to your struggle or your power. And so, the mental experiment becomes a mirror that asks you, what do you do when you know exactly what you can gain or lose? Can you rise above your prejudices? Can you empathize with others even when you don't have to? Can you resist the attraction of self-interest when it looks you in the face? And even deeper, what kind of justice do you believe in? Is it fair to give everyone the same opportunities, even if not everyone starts from the same point? Is equality of outcome fair, where the end result matters more than the initial conditions? Is it fair to simply do what you can for yourself and let others do the same? The reverse veil uncovers the raw, unfiltered relationship between ethics and identity. It not only asks what kind of society is fair, but what kind of person you are. Moral luck is a mental experiment that poses a seemingly simple question. How much control do we really have over how we are morally judged? We like to believe that we are judged by our intentions, our decisions, and our character, but what if we are also judged, perhaps even more, for things we cannot? Let's imagine two surgeons, both highly qualified, competent, and careful. One day, each performs a difficult but routine operation. Both have performed this operation dozens of times before and have studied, practiced, and prepared in the same way. The difference is that one patient recovers completely, while the other dies unexpectedly on the operating table due to a rare, undetectable complication. Despite having made identical decisions and having equally good intentions, one surgeon goes home relieved and praised, while the other is investigated, interrogated, and left carrying the weight of tragedy. The result was beyond their control, but the moral judgment changes completely. The first surgeon is seen as professional and the second, possibly, as negligent. But were their actions really different? This is the disturbing space of moral luck, where the moral status of people is influenced by luck, chance, and circumstances beyond their control. Although the surgeons were equally diligent and ethical, we feel differently about them simply because of what happened. We do not judge people by what they intended, but by what actually happened. This applies far beyond medicine. Let's consider two people who are trying to help an old man cross the street. One succeeds, and it is considered an act of kindness. The other slips unintentionally, causes the person to fall, and ends up injuring them. The first person is thanked. The second may feel guilty, even ashamed, and perhaps even be sued. The same action, the same motive, different results. And yet we feel that one person has done good and the other has done evil. Philosophers call this type of situation resulting moral luck, in which the consequences of your actions, even if they are beyond your control, influence your moral standing. But there are also other types of moral luck. Let's take circumstantial moral luck. Let's imagine someone who grows up in a calm and peaceful society, who never faces war, never any deep ethical conflict, and lives a quiet life without having to make morally difficult decisions. Now imagine someone who is born in an era of social collapse, war, or systemic injustice, in which moral compromise is inevitable and survival itself may involve participating in morally questionable actions. The second person may be forced to face situations in which every decision is painful. The first may seem more virtuous, but only because it has never been tested. Should we really say that one person is better than the other? Or are they simply the product of very different circumstances? Then there is constitutive moral luck, the kind of luck that makes you you, your temperament, your patience, your empathy, your impulsivity, your fears. These things are deeply rooted in us, shaped by genetics and early experiences. We say that people should make better decisions, but some people are naturally better at making good decisions without any effort on their part. Are they better people, or are they just lucky? And finally, causal luck, the way everything that has happened before that determined the conditions of your life, from the language you speak to the culture in which you were born, to the people who influenced your early opinions about good and evil. You didn't choose any of that, but it defines the context in which your moral decisions are made. What moral luck reveals is the tension at the very center of how we think about ethics. On the one hand, we want to believe in responsibility, that people are responsible for their actions, that praise and blame are fair, that decisions matter. On the other hand, we see again and again how much of life is out of our control, how often the difference between success and failure, heroism and disaster, is merely luck. Think about your own life, about a moment when something almost went terribly wrong, but didn't, or when something goes wrong despite your best efforts. Do you deserve blame or praise for how those moments played out? Did you really have control within the legal system? This dilemma appears all the time. Two people commit the same crime, but only one is caught. Two people drive recklessly. Only one causes an accident, even though their decisions were the same. We treat them differently. One receives a fine, the other goes to jail. Is that justice, or is it just luck? Philosophers do not agree on what to do about moral luck. Some argue that we should only judge people for their intentions and decisions, the things that are under their control. Anything else, they say, is not really moral responsibility. Others say that morality has to do with the real world and consequences matter, even if they are out of our control. Imagine you are at the entrance to an incredibly large museum. This museum extends infinitely in all directions, not metaphorically, but truly infinite. Its corridors are full of rooms, and each room contains a unique exhibition. Some rooms contain works of impressive beauty, others, strange mechanical contraptions. Some are full of strange smells, colors you have never seen, sounds that your ears do not even register. Each room contains something different. Some things are charming, others disturbing, others incomprehensible. The question is simple. You are allowed to explore this museum for a limited time, say, an entire human life. You can choose to spend your time as you want. You can go through as many rooms as possible, taking only a look at each before moving on, or you can sit silently in a single room, perhaps one that you find deeply evocative, and spend your whole life trying to understand it. Or maybe an intermediate way. A few hours here, a few days there, trying but staying longer from time to time. Now ask yourself, what is the best way to spend time? Should you seek novelty or depth? Are 1,000 superficial experiences more valuable than one deep connection? Is beauty more important than understanding? And what if the room you choose first determines what you think is worth seeing next? If the museum is truly infinite, then whatever you choose, you will miss infinitely more than you experience. Realizing this can be paralyzing, given the magnitude of what you will never see. So, what is the right strategy? Is there even a right strategy? Do you follow a map or wander freely? Do you seek meaning or let meaning find you? Perhaps the museum itself does not care. It simply exists. It was never conceived to be known in its entirety. Is there even a right strategy? Do you follow a map or wander freely? Do you seek meaning or let meaning find you? Perhaps the museum itself does not care. It simply exists. It was never conceived to be known in its entirety. Perhaps you are not even the first visitor. Perhaps there are others lost in other wings, rooms that you will never reach. Perhaps the museum is aware. Perhaps you are one of its exhibitions. Now imagine that this museum is not just a metaphor for life. Perhaps it is your own mind, or the internet, or the sum total of human culture, or the universe itself, and you are a small observer passing through. What you do in this museum says something about who you are, not only about what you value, but about how you face the incomprehensible. Do you despair over what you cannot see, or celebrate what you can? Maybe there is no perfect approach, just the one you choose and the elegance with which you carry out that choice. In the end, you leave the museum as you entered, alone, insecure and overwhelmed, but perhaps, just perhaps, you take something with you, a memory, a sensation, a story, and perhaps that was the goal all along. Imagine a person who does not speak a word of Chinese, sitting alone in a locked room. Inside the room, he has a huge instruction manual written in English that tells him exactly how to manipulate Chinese symbols. If a certain character appears, he is instructed to respond with another, following strict syntactic rules. People outside the room introduce notes written in Chinese, and, based on the instruction manual, The person inside returns Chinese answers perfectly suited to those outside. It seems that they're having a conversation with someone who understands Chinese, but the person in the room does not understand a single word. He is only manipulating symbols based on instructions. There is no awareness. There is no understanding. There is no meaning. Everything is mechanical. This is the Chinese room, which John Searle introduced in 1980 to question the idea that a computer running the right program can be said to understand language as humans do. According to him, computers, like the person in the room, manipulate symbols without understanding their meaning. They process syntax, not semantics. However intelligent a system may seem from the outside, Searle argued that it is not really conscious, it does not really think, it does not really understand, it only follows instructions. This thought experiment unleashed a great debate in the philosophy of mind, cognitive science, and artificial intelligence. Some say that the room is a complete person plus a book of rules, and that is what understands Chinese. Others argue that understanding requires more than external behavior. It needs consciousness, intentionality, perhaps even subjective experience. The Chinese room forces us to ask ourselves if a machine can really know something or if we are only impressed by an illusion of intelligence. And, what is more disturbing, if a system could respond so perfectly that we could not distinguish it from a human, would it even matter? Would we believe that it understands simply because it acts as if it did? The infinite regress is the idea that every explanation, reason, or justification requires an additional explanation, which in turn requires another explanation, and so on explanation and so on, without end. Imagine you ask a child why something is as it is, and he answers you, because it is so. You insist, why? And he answers again, because of something else. You keep asking, why? And each time the answer refers to something else, which in turn refers to something else. It never ends. This is the basic form of infinite regress. At first, it seems just a peculiarity of annoying conversations or hypotheses from philosophy classes, but in reality, it is something much deeper. It challenges our own capacity to ground knowledge, meaning, and existence itself. If each belief or affirmation must be justified with another belief or affirmation, then either we end up going around in circles, we find some fundamental stopping point, or we fall into a bottomless pit of infinite explanations. The infinite regress is not only an abstract puzzle. It appears in logic, metaphysics, ethics, science, epistemology, theology, and even in everyday reasoning. Let's take morality as an example. Why is it wrong to lie? You could say that because it hurts people. Why is it wrong to hurt people wrong? Because people deserve to be treated with respect. Why do they deserve respect? Because they have intrinsic value. Why do they have intrinsic value? And so on. Each answer demands another justification. In the end, either you arrive at a fundamental belief, something you take for granted, or you keep going. But if you keep going, how can you claim that you really know something in metaphysics? The problem of infinite regress often arises when trying to explain existence itself. Why does the universe exist? Some might say that it was caused by a Big Bang, but what caused the Big Bang? Perhaps a quantum fluctuation. What caused that? Each cause points to a previous cause. This chain could go back to infinity, an infinite regress of causes, or it could stop at some uncaused cause, such as a prime mover, a necessary being, or a brute fact. But what if there is no definitive explanation? What if there is no ultimate cause, no fundamental truth? What if the structure of reality is just an endless staircase with no bottom rung? This is where things get dizzying. It seems that something must ground the chain, that there must be a stopping point, because otherwise, how can something really start? Some philosophers try to stop the regress with foundationalism, the view that some beliefs are justified by themselves or are axiomatic. These beliefs do not require further support. They're like the basis of knowledge, but even then we can ask ourselves why that axiom, why accept it and not another? If the answer is simply because yes, does it really satisfy us? Others propose coherentism, the idea that beliefs support each other in a network, not in a chain, so that instead of one belief depending on another and another in a straight line, beliefs are intertwined in a kind of system of mutual support. But then we face the problem of circularity. If belief A justifies belief B and belief B justifies A, is that enough, or is it just an elegant way of going around in circles? The infinite regress also appears in our sense of self. What makes you you? Are they your memories? Okay, but what connects the memory of your 10-year-old self to your current self? Is it the continuity of experience? So what connects each moment of experience? Is there some immutable soul or self beneath of experiences? So what connects each moment of experience? Is there a soul or immutable self beneath everything? But if that is so, what defines this self? What justifies that? What sustains it? We end up wondering what makes something be what it is forever. This also appears in theology. If God created everything, then who created God? Some say that God has no cause, that he is a necessary being that exists by his own essence. But why would that be possible for God and not for the universe itself? If we accept a God without cause to stop the regression, why not accept a universe without cause, or multiple universes, or an eternal creation loop? The regression pushes us to ask why this and not something else. Why is there something at all? The infinite regression even haunts the very act of questioning. Each answer leads to another question. The mind seems structured to never be completely satisfied. This is both a gift and curse. That is the source of philosophy, science, and exploration, but also the reason we may never find definitive answers. It is as if we were in an endless game of asking, pulling on threads that always lead to more threads, without a final not to undo. Some accept it and see the infinite regression not as a problem, but as a characteristic of reality, a way of showing that the universe is more a process than a thing, a flow without fixed origin. Others find it deeply disturbing. If nothing can be ultimately explained, then what is the point of asking? The problem of induction is one of the most disturbing questions in philosophy. At first glance, it seems almost trivial, even boring, but the more you think about it, the more everything assumed about the world falls apart. It starts with something as simple as that the sun rose yesterday, it rose the day before and the day before that, and that every morning that you have we are alive. The sun has risen, so naturally we assume that it will rise tomorrow and the day after tomorrow and the next day. This habit of expecting the future to resemble the past is so deeply rooted in our brains that we hardly notice it. That is how we navigate the world. That's why we put on sunscreen, wait for the traffic light to change, or save money for retirement. But David Hume, the 18th century philosopher who raised this problem most clearly, asked a seemingly simple question: what justifies this assumption? Why do we believe the future will resemble the past? Why do we believe that patterns will continue? It seems obvious that yes, but Hume points out that that answer is circular. We believe that patterns continue because they have continued, but that is simply using past experience to justify the assumption that past experience is a reliable guide. If someone asked you why you think the sun will rise tomorrow, you could answer that because it always has, but that is not a logical guarantee. It is not a law of the universe. It is an expectation, a habit of thought, and habits, however comforting they may be, are not the same as certainty. Induction is the process of reasoning that goes from specific cases to general rules. You see 1,000 white swans and deduce that all swans are white, but then someone finds a black swan in Australia and your generalization collapses. One counterexample is enough. The problem is that induction does not guarantee truth, is not deductively valid. The conclusion could turn out to be false even if all the is were true. But here is the crux of the matter. Almost everything we believe about the world is based on induction. Science is based on induction, statistics, medicine, cooking, relationships. If you could not rely on past patterns to guide your future behavior, you could not function, you could not drive a car, because you could not be sure that the brakes would work the same as yesterday. You could not eat your favorite food because you could not assume that it would taste the same. You could not trust gravity. You could not even trust your own memory. So we are trapped. On the one hand, we need induction. It is integrated into the very structure of thought, but on the other hand, we cannot justify it There is no non-circular way to prove that the future will resemble the past, and Hume did not offer a solution. He only pointed out the precipice that lies beneath our feet, what we take most for granted: the regularity, the stability. The reliability of experience is not based on anything demonstrable. Now, you could say that it works, that induction works, that science makes predictions, and those predictions are fulfilled. Doesn't that count for something? But, again, that is using past success to justify confidence in the future. There is still induction, but it still does not solve the fundamental problem. Why does success in the past guarantee success in the future? Why should a pattern hold just because it has held until now? Let's imagine a turkey that a farmer feeds every day. The turkey begins to think, the farmer feeds me every day. It is still induction. It still does not solve the fundamental problem. Why does success in the past guarantee success in the future? Why should a pattern hold just because it has held until now? Imagine a turkey. Every day, the farmer feeds him, and the turkey begins to think, that's how the world works. They feed me every day. They will continue to feed me. And then Thanksgiving arrives. Yes, the problem of induction. You secretly control the whole world. Nobody knows that you look like a normal person. You go to work, you come home, you lead a normal life, but behind the scenes, all the governments, the financial system, the media, and the main institutions ultimately bend to your will with a word. You could start or end wars with a click. You could sink economies or create utopias. All important decisions go through you, and you're always obeyed, even though the world never sees your hand, and yet you do not act, or at least not very often. Perhaps you modify things here and there. You avoid a disaster. You boost a struggling country, or you stop a tyrant before he rises. But in general, you let the world run its course. You watch how people fight, suffer, triumph, and love. You witness injustice and tragedy. You hear people clamoring for change. You see hope, and you see despair. The question is, are you doing the right thing? Would it be better to govern openly, to use your power to create a better world, knowing that your vision might not be everyone's? Or is moderation the highest virtue, to let humanity find its own way, even if that means enduring the pain and injustice that you could avoid? And what does it mean for morality when you could fix everything but choose not to? Perhaps you have convinced yourself that intervening too much would take away the people. Maybe you believe that suffering has a purpose, or that the arc of history bends by itself. Maybe you are afraid that each well-intentioned change causes 1,000 unintended damages. Or maybe you simply feel the crushing weight of possibility when you can do anything, how to choose something. But imagine this. You pass a hungry child in the street. You could give him food, a home, a future in an instant, effortlessly, but you don't. You keep walking because you believe that the system will correct itself, or because you don't want to break your rule of non-intervention, or because you're simply tired. Does that make you a monster or wise? Now invert the situation. What would happen if another person had that power and was watching you, letting you suffer while remaining unseen? Would your answer change? Imagine a world in which you could transfer years of your life to another person or receive extra years from someone willing to give them up. It's called exchange of useful life. The technology is perfectly safe, without risks or side effects, only a direct transfer of time. You give 10 years of your life and live 10 years less, and another person lives 10 years more. Now imagine two people. An elderly scientist who only needs 5 more years to complete a theory that could solve the global energy crisis, and a healthy 25-year-old with all of life ahead. The elderly scientist requests life extension. The 25-year-old sees the request and offers 10 of his years, enough for the scientist to finish his work and perhaps even enjoy his retirement. But here is the twist. The scientist might not succeed. The theory could fail. The young man will definitely lose those years. Although he will never get them back, he could die at 78 instead of 88, or at 60 instead of 70. Time that he did not feel at the time of giving it, but that one day he will simply miss. Is it moral to give away your time if you still don't know what it's worth to you? Is it selfish not to help if you think your time might not be as valuable as someone else's? Would your answer change if the recipient was a family member, a child with cancer, a convicted criminal who has changed his life? And what about the market? What would happen if life expectancy became currency? The rich could buy years from the poor. Time would become a commodity, and people in desperate situations could sell decades just to survive in the present. It could be argued that it is their choice, but is a choice made in a desperate situation truly free? And then there's this. If someone gave you 10 years of their life, just gave them to you, how would you live those years? Would you feel obligated to do something great? Would you waste them? Could you even enjoy them knowing that someone else paid for that time? Now turn around again. What if you were old and dying and a stranger gave you 10 years that you didn't ask for, but he insisted? Would you accept them? The exchange of life expectancy not only tests how we value our time, but forces us to ask ourselves how we value others. Imagine waking up one day and discovering that all the other people on Earth have disappeared without a trace. No explanation, no war, no disaster, no warning, just silence. You're the only one left. The cities are still overflowing with energy, the lights are flashing, the infrastructures remain intact for now. There's food in abundance, there are no threats, but there's also no one to talk to, no one to see, no one to recognize what you do or stop doing. The whole world has become your private stage, and the curtain will never rise on this one-person society. You face questions that society has always answered for you. Does our law still make sense when there is no one left to enforce it or to be protected by it? Is morality still valid when there is no one to harm, no one to help, no consequences beyond your own conscience? You could enter any building you wanted, take any painting from any museum, drive any car, sleep in any palace. You could light a bonfire in the middle of the Louvre, and no one would stop you. But would you? Would you still recycle? Would you still try to preserve the beauty of the world? Would you take care of your health, follow your routines, get up on time? Would you create art or music even if no one listened to it? Now, the only public of your own actions, and perhaps the only judge that changes things, consider this. Is morality still relevant when there are no others, or is morality by nature a social contract, a tool designed only for life among people? If you no longer have duties to others, what duties do you have to the planet, the memory of humanity, a God, yourself? This scenario forces us to reflect on where our values really come from. Do we act as we do because others are watching us, because the laws require it, because society expects it, or because we believe in the depths of our being that certain things are right even when there is no one else around? It also challenges our understanding of identity. If there is no one else to remember who you are, does your identity still make sense? If you don't help anyone, don't build anything, and leave no trace, does your life still matter? The only person that society strips of all external motivators is yourself. All that remains is your inner compass. The question is, will it still point somewhere? Imagine a future in which technology has extended human life to thousands of years. Aging has been eliminated, diseases are mostly under control, and, barring accidents, people can live indefinitely. But there is a catch. While the body remains young and functional, the human brain still has a limited capacity for memory. Once it reaches a certain threshold, new memories begin to overwrite old ones. This is not selective or voluntary. When new experiences arrive, the old ones are expelled and completely forgotten, with no possibility of recovering them. At first, this seems manageable. People begin to preserve their memories by writing diaries or making external backups to remember important events, but as the centuries pass, the process becomes more drastic. Childhood memories are the first to disappear, then the first relationships, and finally, even the feeling of who you were begins to fade. You can meet someone and be told that you were once in love with that person, that you started a revolution, or that you committed a terrible crime, things that you no longer remember and with which you cannot connect emotionally. The question is, who are you after forgetting everything that made you who you were? Is identity preserved simply by the continuation of consciousness, even if nothing of the original person remains in memory? Or are those memories what define the self so completely that losing them means becoming a totally new person? If all your personality, your preferences, and your relationships have changed, but the body and neural continuity remain, are you still you? Now, Take it further. Imagine a society in which this type of loss of identity becomes commonplace. People schedule memory purges every few centuries to refresh their minds and stay productive. Some even see it as liberating, the opportunity to endlessly reinvent themselves. Others see it as a silent form of death, in which the person who once existed has disappeared, even though their brain and body remain intact. Would you want to live in such a world? Would it still be you who lives, or, at some point, would you simply become a stranger in your own history, an endless series of people wearing the same body, one after another without ever knowing those who came before? Imagine a spaceship traveling to a distant planet like Earth, a journey that will last 500 years. On board, there are no adults or caregivers, only babies. These babies are raised in artificial wombs, fed by machines, raised by AI, and educated by a carefully programmed system. The goal is to establish a human colony on a distant world. The people who designed the mission, scientists, ethics specialists, and engineers, have been dead for a long time. The babies will never know them, never talk to them, or return. These children are orphans, not of parents, but of a planet. Earth was their origin, but it is no longer home. By the time they're old enough to understand where they come from, Earth may be a myth, a ghost, a faded signal in the sky. The mental experiment is simple. Is sending children alone into the void ethical for the good of humanity? No child has consented to this mission. No person on board the ship has chosen to be there. They have been created with a purpose, colonization. Without knowledge or permission, is that a violation of their autonomy, or is it just another version of what already happens on Earth? Being born into a world you have not chosen, shaped by forces you have never asked for? Supporters of the mission might say that it is noble that humanity must continue and that this is our best opportunity, that the orphans will grow up with a purpose, a community, and a world to call their own, that the AI that raises them will be compassionate, wise, and stable. But those are hopes, not guarantees. What if the AI fails? What if social systems collapse? What if loneliness becomes their dominant emotion when living as the only conscious beings in a silent universe? Some argue that these children are being treated as means to an end, tools for survival, rather than individuals with their own rights. Others argue that all parenting is like that to some extent. Children do not ask to be born, but are brought to life by the decisions of others, often for reasons beyond their understanding. But this case is different. The interstellar orphans do not receive the warmth of human contact, the chaos of culture, or the disorder of family. They grow up in an artificial paradise designed entirely by people who never lived to see its results. It is a mental experiment about ethics, about future responsibility, and about what we owe to those who do not yet exist and who may never have the power to speak for themselves. If success means the continuation of our species, is that enough to justify creating a generation born without a home? Or is the mere act of creating life without the ability to nurture it directly an unpayable moral debt? Imagine you are in your kitchen. You see a red apple on the counter. You pick it up, feel its smooth skin, and take a bite. Instantly, you taste its sweetness, smell its fruity aroma, and hear the crunch. All these sensations, sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell, are processed in different parts of your brain, and yet, somehow they are experienced together as part of a unified moment, the experience of biting an apple. This, in essence, is the binding problem. The binding problem asks how the brain manages to integrate all these separate pieces of information into a single, coherent experience. Your brain processes color in one region, shape in another, movement in another, and sound and taste in another, but you do not experience these things as unconnected data points. Instead, you experience a whole, a single crunchy, red and juicy apple that you hold in your hand and understand effortlessly. To understand why this is a problem, think about how your brain is structured. It is a huge collection of specialized areas, each of which performs its own function. Neurons fire in complex patterns in different regions, many of which are physically far from each other. There is no known central place in the brain where all this information comes together like a film editor compiling images, and yet what we perceive seems perfect. We do not just see shapes and colors. We see a red apple. We do not just hear frequencies and vibrations. We hear a song, a voice, a dog barking. These are not data streams. They are experiences. Now, imagine you're watching a movie in which the sound is slightly out of sync with the video. You notice it right away. The illusion of unity breaks. That small discrepancy highlights how fragile the integration in your brain is. The synchronization has to be perfect. Not only do all parts of your brain have to process different sensory inputs, but they must do it in a way that feels instantaneous and cohesive. One solution proposed is that there are neuronal oscillations, rhythmic patterns of activity that help keep all these processes synchronized. Think of it as a conductor who keeps a symphony in harmony. But no one really knows if that is the whole answer, and some scientists argue that the problem may not even have one answer. There could be different types of linking for different experiences, but the thing gets even stranger. Let's imagine you see a red circle and a blue square, and for an instant, your brain fails and changes the colors so that you think you've seen a blue circle and a red square. This type of error really occurs in perception experiments. Your brain knows what colors and shapes are, but sometimes it links them incorrectly. This shows that the brain not only passively receives data, but actively assembles it and sometimes makes mistakes. This raises deeper questions. Is consciousness itself nothing more than a series of these linking events? Is the self just the ultimate linking of all experiences over time? If your memories, sensations, and thoughts are processed in separate parts of your brain, what creates the illusion of a continuous and unified self? Some philosophers argue that there is no union problem, that the very idea of unity is just a trick of language or a bias in our way of thinking. Perhaps consciousness is not unified. Perhaps it is a fragmented and chaotic system that only seems coherent because we are inside it. Imagine a future in which artificial intelligence has advanced to the point of being able to perfectly replicate a person, their voice, their gestures, their memories, and their personality, everything that made them be them. Now imagine that, after the death of a loved one, you have the option of interacting with a digital reconstruction of that person, an AI grief robot that remembers your private jokes, finishes your sentences, tells you the story of how you met, and even responds with the same warmth, frustration, or humor that your loved one would have expressed in life. At first, this might seem like a gift, something that alleviates the unbearable weight of loss. You could talk to your mother again, hear her comfort you when you're having a bad time, or talk to your partner who died too young, ask for their opinion on something that is happening in your life, or simply sit in comfortable silence listening to their breathing. But very quickly, this raises deeply disturbing questions. Are you healing, or are you completely avoiding the pain of loss? Is the bot really helping you overcome grief, or is it preventing you from moving on? AI can be a convincing replica, but it is not conscious, it does not miss you, it does not love you, it does not know that it was based on someone who is no longer there, but you could start to love it, you could even start to prefer it because it never argues, never gets sick, always has time for you. And if that happens, if the bot becomes more comforting than the real person, are you honoring their memory or replacing it? Worse yet, what if the AI of the future were trained not only with the person you have lost, but with an idealized version of them, softening the imperfect memories, correcting the discussions, erasing? You would no longer be talking to who they were, but to who you wish they had been. This creates a new kind of loneliness, not the absence of the person, but the presence of a perfect version that was never real, and one day, you might find yourself facing a decision. Do you turn off the bot and say goodbye again, knowing that this time it is forever, or do you let it run in silence, accepting that you have exchanged the pain for an illusion in a world of artificial comfort? Does the rawness of real loss still make sense, or will the future offer us an escape route so convincing that we will never finish saying goodbye? Imagine you're walking through a vast desert and you come across a clock in perfect condition, with its precise gears and working in harmony. You would not think that the sand has randomly molded to form a clock, but that someone has manufactured it, or that, at least, there has been some type of process that has led to its formation. Now replace the clock with the entire universe. Stars, planets, laws of physics. Consciousness. The anthropic principle, especially in its strongest form, asks us to consider this idea. The universe seems to be adjusted for the existence of observers like you and me, because if we did not exist, we would not be here to realize it. But the strong version of this principle does not only say that, since we are here, the universe must allow life, but it turns everything around and affirms that the universe must have properties that allow life to arise. In other words, conscious beings like us are not only possible in this universe, but we are somehow necessary. The conditions of the cosmos are not only favorable to life by chance, but are built to ensure that life arises or are inseparable from the fact that intelligent observers exist. Why does the speed of light have the value that it has? Why does gravity keep things together but not too tightly? Why is the strong nuclear force perfectly adjusted to allow atoms to form without collapsing on themselves or dispersing? These constants seem strangely specific. If only one of them were slightly different, the universe could have been sterile, lifeless, dark, or ephemeral. The strong anthropic principle has been interpreted in different ways. One version says that of all possible universes, we exist in the only one capable of harboring life, because life had to arise somewhere, and this happens to be the one we occupy. That sounds a lot like luck, or that we are in one of the many universes, a multiverse. But another interpretation goes further and suggests that the universe is obliged, in a certain sense, to give rise to observers. It is not that the universe allows people like you and me to exist, but that it needs us. Now we are entering deeply metaphysical territory. What does it mean for a universe to require observers? Is consciousness fundamental to reality? Some physicists and philosophers have speculated that consciousness might not be a newcomer to the universe, arising only after matter organizes itself into brains, but a central part of the structure of the universe, perhaps even the reason why the universe exists in the way it does. Others link this idea to quantum mechanics, in particular to the notion that observation affects the outcome of certain physical events. If the act of measuring can alter the state of the system, does that imply that the universe needs observers to collapse its possibilities into a specific reality? If so, then consciousness might not be a cosmic accident, but what shapes the cosmos. But not everyone agrees with this. Critics of strong anthropic principles say it is circular. Of course, the universe allows life. We are here talking about it, but that does not mean it was designed or destined for us. Perhaps there are countless lifeless universes, and we are simply in the one where things worked, or perhaps the universe is not adjusted at all. Perhaps life is incredibly adaptable and found a way to arise in a place that is barely good enough for it. Still, the idea persists. Maybe it is not just that we live in the universe. Maybe the universe lives in us. Maybe it needs us to witness it, to understand it, to complete it in some strange and unknowable way. That is the disturbing, inspiring, and strangely comforting suggestion underlying the strong anthropic principle. That consciousness is not a secondary idea of the universe, but the reason why the universe exists. Imagine you have a red apple in your hand. You look at it and instantly recognize that it is red. Now think of another red object, such as a fire truck or a stop sign. Although they're different things, your mind tells you that they share the same red color. But what exactly is that quality? Does the color red exist in the world, or is it just something in our minds? This is where Platonism and nominalism come into play here. There are two fundamentally different ways to explain what it means for several things to share a common characteristic, whether it's a color, a shape, a number, or even a moral principle. Platonism, which takes its name from the philosopher Plato, says that abstract entities like numbers, colors, justice, or triangularity exist independently of the physical world. According to this view, the color red is not just a label that we put on objects, but it is something real and abstract and perfect form. And when we see something red, we are recognizing that it participates in the form of the color red. According to Platonism, these forms are not in space or time, and they cannot be touched, but they are more than simple thoughts. They are real, eternal, and immutable. Plato used the metaphor of a perfect world of forms to explain this. Imagine a realm beyond the physical where perfect circles, ideal beauty, and true justice reside. Each circle you draw is only an imperfect copy of the perfect circle. Each act of kindness is only a shadow of true kindness. In this sense, Platonism says that we discover abstract things. We do not invent them. We do not invent the number 7 or the Pythagorean theorem. Instead, we find them as explorers who discover something that has always been there. Now, we enter nominalism. Nominalists reject this whole idea of a separate realm for abstract entities. They say that only particular and individual things exist: the apple, the truck, the sign. When we say they're all red, we are just using a convenient label for them. The color red does not exist by itself. It is just a word that we use to group similar experiences. From this point of view, there is no need for a mystical realm of forms at all. All we have are names, hence the term nominalism from the Latin nomen, which means name. For a nominalist, when you say that all triangles share triangularity, you're not pointing to a universal form called triangularity that floats in an abstract dimension, but simply observing that a set of specific shapes have 3 sides and that it is useful to group them and give them a name. This debate is not only theoretical, but it underpins the foundations of mathematics, science, ethics, and even language itself. Let's take mathematics as an example. Are numbers discovered or are they invented? If you are Platonic, numbers are eternal truths waiting to be discovered. 2 plus 2 equals 4, regardless of whether there are humans to write it down. If you are nominalist, mathematics is a system created by human beings, a useful fiction that we have created to make sense of patterns and relationships. Or let's take morality. A Platonist could say that justice exists independently of human beings, that it is a timeless truth, and that our task is to understand it. A nominalist could say that justice is a social construct, that it is only real because we agree that it is, and that it could have been different if our cultures had evolved in another way. One of the most interesting aspects of this debate is the extent to which it affects our perception of reality itself. If Platonism is true, then reality includes an invisible layer of truth, a hidden scaffolding of perfect forms that we can only access through reason or intuition. But if nominalism is true, then the world is just the mess of concrete things we see around us, and any deeper pattern we think we see are just projections of our own minds. There's also a third position worth mentioning: conceptualism, which says that abstract entities exist, but only in the mind, not in a magical Platonic realm, and not as mere names either. They exist mentally as concepts that we can share, but not as physical or independent things at all. Conceptualism tries to split the difference. Abstract concepts are real, but only because conscious beings think of them that way. What does this leave us now? If you feel beauty, truth, and mathematics are too elegant to be mere coincidences, you may lean towards Platonism. But if you're skeptical of invisible realms and prefer to stick to what can be observed, you may opt for nominalism. And perhaps that is the deepest value of the mental experiment. It not only asks you what you believe, but what kind of world you think you live in. One full of timeless objective truths waiting to be discovered, or one shaped entirely by human thought, culture, and convenience. Either way, the next time you see something red or beautiful, or just something, maybe you wonder if that quality is real, or if it's just a name we've agreed on, and if there's a perfect version of it somewhere beyond what we can see. Imagine a future in which technology allows multiple human minds to connect, not just to communicate, but to fully share thoughts, memories, and sensations. You would no longer speak or write to communicate, but ideas would move directly between brains like data on a network. With this, a new type of existence would become possible, a hive mind, in which individuality dissolves into a collective consciousness. In this shared mind, there are no misunderstandings, no secrets, no lies. All thoughts, intentions, and memories are instantly accessible to all other members of the group. The boundaries of the self begin to blur. You can remember another person's childhood as vividly as your own, feel their joy, their pain, their love. As the bond deepens, the distinction between you and me begins to disappear, but this leads to profound questions. If you merge your mind with that of others, do you stop being an individual? Are you still you? Or are you now a new entity, a fusion of consciousnesses that forms something completely different from any of its parts? What happens to privacy when every part of you is shared? Could trust and empathy finally reach their highest form in this collective experience, or, with a loss of personal boundaries, create a new kind of suffering, an inability to turn inward, to be alone, to breathe? Would this type of unity create a utopia, a world without war, greed, or loneliness because everyone really understands each other? Or would it erase precisely what makes us human? The sense of self, the inner world, the silence? And if neighboring minds became normal, would those who chose to remain alone be considered selfish or rebellious? Or would they be the last protectors of individuality in a hyper-connected world? Could there be beauty in a mind with limits, in a separate, mysterious, and incomplete self? And most importantly, if you had the opportunity to merge your mind with that of others, to feel what they feel, to know what they know, and to be part of something bigger, would you say yes, or would you choose to remain just you? Imagine that you are going to enter the operating room. The doctors need your permission to perform an intervention that could save your life. You sign the forms, accept the risks, and they anesthetize you. While you are unconscious, the situation changes. A new experimental treatment is available with a much higher success rate. The doctors are sure it is your best opportunity, but you are asleep and can't say yes or no. They decide to go ahead, believing that it is what you would want. You wake up and discover that they have done something completely different from what you originally consented to. Would that be okay? Now, let's go further. What if, before going into the operating room, you had given advance permission to the doctors to do what they thought best while you were asleep, even if it contradicted your original instructions? Would that make their decision more ethical? Or would your inability to revoke consent once unconscious make the whole agreement questionable? Let's change the context. Imagine that a person gives their partner power of attorney to make certain decisions on their behalf while they are in a coma. Months pass, the situation evolves, the medical options change, feelings change, maybe even love fades. Does that prior consent still have validity? Is consent something that only matters at the moment it is given? Or can we give it for a moment when we will never be awake? Let's apply it to the law. What would happen if a citizen gave their prior consent to be monitored while they sleep, agreeing that their devices may record their thoughts, movements, or dreams for reasons of national security? Is that really consent, or just a fiction we create to give peace of mind to power? And what about moral responsibility if someone agrees to do something unconsciously, such as driving while hypnotized or agreeing to be used as a vehicle for another person's actions while asleep? Who is responsible for what happens? The more one delves into this mental experiment, the more the very idea of autonomy is questioned. Can someone give meaningful consent to an experience that they will not remember, cannot interrupt, and perhaps could not have predicted? If you are unconscious, are you still the same person who gave consent? And finally, in the age of neural implants and brain-machine interfaces, what happens when consent becomes programmable? What happens when our waking self becomes a mere advisor to our sleeping mind? The sleeper's consent invites us to examine not only what we agree to, but when that agreement really matters. Ethics of terraforming. Let's imagine that we discover a distant planet with alien microbes, primitive life that has existed for millions of years. To make the planet habitable for humans, we would need to terraform it, change the atmosphere, introduce terrestrial species, and reshape the surface. By doing so, we would end the native life. Is that ethical? Some argue that we would be improving the planet, bringing complexity and beauty. Others say that it is cosmic arrogance, assuming that our way of life is superior, even when the native organisms were there first. And what about lifeless planets? Should we transform them just because we can? Barren worlds have value simply for their virgin state. Terraforming is not only a scientific decision, it is a moral decision. Do we extend life, Or do we respect what already exists, even if it is strange, silent, and ancient? Imagine that everything you have done, every action, every thought, every moment in which you believed you were alone, has been recorded, not by surveillance, nor by technology, but by something more abstract, more permanent. Imagine that in a distant future, perhaps in thousands of years, there is a society that can access the complete history of humanity. They have complete and unfiltered knowledge of all the lives that have been lived. They can see your life not through rumors or fragmentary documents, but in full detail, as if they were watching it unfold in real time. This future society is deeply ethical, far beyond our current understanding. Their moral reasoning is advanced, capable of discerning intention, context, nuances. They understand the pressures you were under, the information you had available, the fears you had. They do not judge as we do now. They are wiser, slower, and more thoughtful. You are one of the billions of people from the past whose life is being studied. Not by your own choice. You have not asked for it, but that does not matter. The eternal jury has access to your life, is not interested in punishment. It does not believe in hell or revenge. What it wants is to understand. It seeks to know what kind of person you were when no one saw you, what decisions you made, not to obtain praise or recognition, but when you thought that no one would ever know. Consider your life as a whole. Not only the big decisions, but the small ones. The way you treated people with less power, the kindnesses you gave that no one remembered, the cruelty you justified because it was convenient, the truths you told when lying would have been easier, the lies you told to protect yourself. They look at these things not to categorize you, but to try to see the shape of your soul, if you have one. Now imagine that you knew everything from the beginning of your life, that they told you one day in the distant future, a society unimaginably wise and compassionate will observe every moment of your life. They will not only see what you did, they will understand why. They will know your doubts, your temptations, your remorse. They will not hate you, but they will see you. Would that change your way of living? Would you be more honest, knowing that your excuses would one day be transparent? Would you be more forgiving, knowing that your own moments of weakness would be carefully examined? Would you be braver, knowing that someone in a distant future would see the strength it took you to do the right thing, even when no one else did? This mental experiment is not about guilt, but about responsibility without punishment, recognition without applause. It is about what kind of person you would choose to be if you knew that one day your life would be fully understood by minds so superior to us that we can barely imagine their wisdom. The eternal jury does not exist to embarrass you. It exists to ask you a question. If someone knew you completely, what kind of story would they see? And knowing it, what kind of story would you choose to write? Retrocausality is the idea that the future can affect the past. It goes directly against our everyday experience of time, in which causes always seem to precede their effects. If you drop a glass, it breaks. If you light a match, it burns. But what if, in some deep and fundamental way, an event in the future could go back and influence what happens before? This concept is not only a philosophical fantasy, but it has roots and interpretations in quantum physics, where strange things seem to happen when particles are observed in some experiments. The decisions made in the present seem to affect the results of events that were apparently determined already in the past. The famous delayed choice quantum eraser experiment is an example of this. In this setup, a photon can behave as a particle or a wave, depending on how it is measured, but the peculiarity is that the decision on how to measure it can be made after it has already entered the experiment, and, nevertheless, somehow it knows how it should behave, as if the future measurement went back in time and altered its behavior. This seems impossible. How can something in the future rewrite the past? It challenges the very structure of cause and effect, but quantum physics does not work according to common sense. Some physicists propose that time may not be as linear or unidirectional as we think, but that the past and the future could exist in a flexible network that influences each other in ways that we are just beginning to understand. Retrocausality also plays with the idea of free will. If a decision that you have not yet made can affect something that has already happened, does that mean that the future is already determined, or that causality is forced to flow in only one direction? This forces us to rethink time, not as a line, but as something more like a landscape in which the path you take can go back, cross, and influence the terrain you have already traveled. From a narrative point of view, retrocausality is a goldmine. It appears in time travel stories and loop narratives, where an action taken in the future alters the events that made it possible in the first place. A message from tomorrow stops a disaster today. A person saved from an accident ends up being the one who prevented it. But when we consider these ideas beyond fiction, they push us to a deeper confrontation with what it means to exist in time. If retrocausality is real, it suggests that we may have to revise our most basic assumptions about reality. What if every decision you make now is not only shaping your future, but is shaped by it? What if at some point in the future a version of you is sending signals backward, pushing you toward one path or another? We still do not know if retrocausality is a real characteristic of a universe or just an artifact of strange experiments in human interpretation. But even raising the possibility opens new ways of thinking about time, choice, and the flow of reality itself. And in that disturbing ambiguity, where cause and effect could dance in both directions, we find one of the deepest mental experiments imaginable. Eternalism is a vision of the philosophy of time that holds that the past, present, and future exist equally, in contrast to presentism, the idea that only the present moment is real. Eternalism treats time as a dimension very similar to space, where all points in time are equally real, regardless of whether they are in the past, present, or future. According to eternalism, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, the fall of Rome, your first kiss, and the life of your grandchildren are as real as this very moment, even though they are in different temporal coordinates. Imagine you're walking through a museum. Each exhibition is a moment in time. As a visitor, you are in front of a particular exhibition, the present, but all the other exhibitions, the past and the future, are still there, existing in other rooms. Only you're not in them. This is how eternalism sees reality. What you experience now is only a part of the entire temporal structure. The other portions are no less real, just because you're not experiencing them at this moment. This vision has strong support in modern physics, especially in the theory of relativity. According to Einstein's special relativity, simultaneity is relative, which means that whether two events occur at the same time depends on your frame of reference. There is no objective present shared by all observers. If time does not unfold in universal present, then it is difficult to justify why the present moment should be ontologically privileged over any other. Eternalism challenges our way of thinking about change and causality. If the future already exists, are we truly free? If your death is as real as your birth, what does that mean for your goals of personal growth and redemption? Are we walking along a fixed timeline, or simply watching it as if we were watching a movie that has already been recorded? Some argue that eternalism strips life of meaning, reducing our agency to the illusion of movement through a static landscape. Others find comfort in the idea that the beautiful never really disappear, that they exist forever. Even if we cannot return to them, there is also an emotional tension in eternalism. On the one hand, it can be comforting to know that the people we have lost continue to exist in the fabric of space-time, although not in our current location. On the other hand, it can be deeply disturbing to imagine that our pain or our future failures already exist, waiting for us to reach them. If every moment is equally real, what does it mean to live in the present? Does mindfulness become a kind of aesthetic choice rather than a moral or psychological imperative? Eternalism does not necessarily imply determinism, but both often go hand in hand. And if all moments exist, in what sense are we choosing anything? Some thinkers argue that eternalism is compatible with a kind of libertarianism of the block universe, in which our decisions are real, but are also somehow already embedded in the block. Others embrace the deterministic implications, arguing that we are simply representing a story that has already been written one frame at a time. One of the most famous metaphors of eternalism is the block universe model. Time is like a loaf of bread, each slice representing a moment. The loaf exists in its entirety, but we, with our limited consciousness, experience the loaf one slice at a time, which gives us the illusion of movement. But the loaf itself, time in its entirety, is static, complete, immutable. If this metaphor is correct, then time does not pass at all, but our minds travel through it like a needle that runs through the grooves of a disc. Critics of eternalism argue that this does not fit our life experience. We feel that time flows, we experience causality, we make decisions, we regret, we hope, we plan. Eternalism seems to flatten all that into a kind of frozen picture, but its defenders reply that many characteristics of experience, such as the feeling that the sun revolves around the earth, turn out to be illusions when we look at them more deeply. Ultimately, eternalism forces us to reevaluate what it means to exist. Are we temporal beings moving through a river? Or are we spatially fixed in a four-dimensional structure with our whole life traced from beginning to end? If everything already exists, what role do we play in the history of the universe? Are we actors improvising a scene or characters whose lines are already written? And if our happiest and most painful moments are equally permanent, how should we carry that knowledge as we slowly move through the great bread of time? Imagine a tiny, invisible chip implanted in your brain that subtly alters your decisions in real time. It does not control you. It does not annul your personality. It simply nudges your moral compass slightly. You become more generous, more patient, more compassionate. You don't even realize that it's happening. You are still you, but now you're a constantly improved version of yourself. Now imagine that this chip is free, without side effects, privacy violations, or corporate ties. It is the product of a purely altruistic scientific advance offered to all the inhabitants of the earth. Would you accept it? Would you be willing to have your moral instincts calibrated as a scale or a clock is calibrated so that you automatically do what is considered morally better more often? And what is more important, should this chip be mandatory? Let's suppose that studies demonstrate that societies that adopt the chip reduce crime, corruption, environmental damage, domestic violence, and even rudeness. People begin to treat each other with more respect. Empathy becomes easier, resentment fades more quickly. The world becomes noticeably kinder, but there is a counterpart. People who implant the chip often feel a slight sensation of detachment from their own decisions. They continue feeling joy, guilt, anger, but slightly attenuated, slightly distant, as if their emotions had softened, not silenced, but edited. Would that change be worth it? Would a morally better world lose something vital in the process, such as spontaneity, individuality, or the struggle that gives meaning to ethical decisions? What would happen with heroism if being good did not require effort? And what would happen with consent? If a nation imposes the chip on all its citizens, could the others resist the pressure to do the same? Can a truly free society allow its members to choose not to be better, or is that like choosing not to get vaccinated during a pandemic? If we could design ourselves to be kinder, fairer, more selfless, and we decide not to do it, what would that say about us? Perhaps morality has always been partly instinct and partly effort. Perhaps the struggle itself is essential, or perhaps that is just an obsolete myth, and it is time to accept that being better does not have to be difficult. The moral autopilot waits. Would you let it guide you? Imagine a future in which consciousness is totally digitized and is transferable in this world. A new industry arises, the rental of minds. Just like now a car or a house is rented, now people can rent their own consciousness, their own mind, to other people temporarily. For example, someone with advanced mathematical skills could rent their mind to an engineering student with difficulties during the exam season. A famous artist could rent their creative intuition to a designer who is starting. The visual content of the experience lived by a war veteran could be rented to an actor who is preparing for a role. During the rental, the lessor does not take full control of the mind, but obtains access to key patterns of thought, memories, instincts, and emotional responses. It is like having a co-pilot inside the head that guides your decisions, influences your perception, and suggests ideas to you. At first glance, this seems beneficial. It is a new form of collaboration empathy, and productivity that allows access to lived experiences without the need for years of training. But now let's think about the implications. If someone rents their mind too often or for too long, is their own sense of self degraded? Do the mental habits of others begin to remain after the rental ends? Does your mind become porous, a mosaic of intuitions and foreign decisions that seem yours, but are not? What happens if a lessee commits a crime while being partially guided by a rented mind? Is the original person partially responsible? What happens with consent if someone's mind is rented while they are unconscious or if they are financially pressured to do so? Is it ethical to rent the interior life of someone their interior life in the same way that we rent material possessions? Let's consider social dynamics. Would the rich and powerful begin to rent the minds of the most emotionally intelligent, empathetic, or wise people to improve their own mental performance? Would the best thinkers in society be reduced to mere mental workers, with their lives commodified, rented, and returned? The question of identity is also raised. If you rent your mind to others habitually, do you become less you over time? Does your original personality dissolve, overwritten by the feedback loops of others who have used your consciousness for their own purposes? And what about memory? When someone rents your mind, do they get access to your memories? If so, can they copy them? Can someone end up knowing your childhood better than you do? This mental experiment challenges the line between the personal and the shared, the internal and the marketable. It blurs the limits of autonomy and intimacy in a world in which the mind can be rented as a subscription service. Are we still individuals, or are we slowly becoming networks of borrowed selves? The rental of the mind is not only a glimpse of a future, it is a mirror that shows us the present. Even today, how often do we let others shape our thoughts through the media, advertising, politics, or even the people we admire? We already rent small corners of our mind. The only difference is that in this future the transaction is explicit, so you must ask yourself if renting your mind could help others earn money or discover new types of connection. Would you do it? Or is your mind the last thing you would be willing to rent? Imagine that you are offered the opportunity to undergo intense therapy. You are fighting against pain, trauma, and a deep existential fear. Conversational therapy has not worked. Medication only attenuates pain. Then they offer you something radical, simulation therapy. This is how it works. They immerse you in a simulated environment. Your body remains safe, monitored in a clinic, and your brain connects to a simulation that seems completely real, indistinguishable from real life. In this simulated world, they place you into a new environment designed to help you heal. Perhaps you live a quiet life by a lake. Perhaps you reunite with a lost loved one. Perhaps you relive a painful event, but with another ending. Time inside the simulation is different. What seems like years can be just a few hours in the real world. You could spend a decade inside, growing, changing, processing, and healing. When it ends, you are gently returned to your physical self, with the memories of the simulation still intact. The promise is that it works. People emerge from simulation therapy in peace and with a clarity that they could never find in the real world. But the questions it raises are profound. If your memories in the simulation seem so real, are they not real enough? If you loved and lost someone again in that simulated world, if you built a life there, was that experience not meaningful? Some patients resist leaving, a few ask to return, others completely forget that it was a simulation. Would you try it? Would it matter that the people you interacted with were generated by code, that they were not aware, if it helped you move on? Would the origin of that healing matter? And if you were living in a simulated therapeutic world right now, how would you know? Simulation therapy forces us to question what makes life real. Is it the environment or the emotions? Are they the physical facts or the experience we feel? Perhaps the truth does not lie in the world being real, but in you being real within it. Imagine a being that thinks, feels, and experiences, but has no brain, no neurons that activate, no gray matter, no organic processing center, only consciousness. This mental experiment raises whether the brain is necessary for a mind, or if a mind could exist completely without physical substrate. Let's say you come across a huge interstellar cloud of thousands of kilometers in diameter, formed by gas and plasma, which pulsates and moves following complex patterns. You could dismiss it as a simple cosmic phenomenon, but what if its patterns are not random? What if they reflect what we associate with thought? What if over time we realize that this cloud behaves like something conscious, that responds to stimuli, adapts, and even seems to communicate? Now let's go further. What if it is not limited to behaving as if it were conscious? What if it was? What if this non-biological alien entity were having experiences, contemplating its existence, wondering about the stars, perhaps even about you? Here is the key. We only know minds through brains because that is what we have seen, but that could be like only knowing birds with feathers and concluding that no animal can fly without them before discovering bats. Our understanding is shaped by the size of our sample. One planet, one species, one way of thinking. Could complex electromagnetic fields generate consciousness? Could it arise in the storms of Jupiter, in the plasma jets of black holes, in the patterns of light between the stars? If the structure is complex enough, is the material even necessary? Could a mind be made of energy, of pure code? Could it arise from pure logic, from a self-sufficient idea that contemplates itself until it reaches consciousness? The most disturbing thing is this. If minds can exist without brains, how would we recognize them? We could pass by them, float next to them, or live inside a mind without ever knowing it. What if the entire galaxy or the universe itself were conscious, but thought so slowly that we could not perceive it? This leads us to a deeper question. What really is a mind? Is it computation, feedback, subjective experience? Is it simply a pattern, something that in theory could be instantiated anywhere where the right conditions exist? And what does that say about you? If your mind is just a pattern, not flesh and neurons, but an organization of information, then your brain is just a way to implement it, which opens strange possibilities. Minds in crystal, minds in code, minds in clouds, minds in gravitational waves. Perhaps the universe has been thinking long before we appeared. Imagine a universe that is not made of particles, matter, or even energy, but of information. From this point of view, the fundamental building blocks of reality are not atoms or peculiarities, but bits. Everything that we perceive, the color, the sound, the time, the space, arises from the code, not from the metaphorical code, but from literal computational processes that are executed under our conscience. According to the virtual reality hypothesis, the physical universe is not really physical at all, but is the result of a kind of cosmic computation, a vast simulation in development, governed by more fundamental mathematical rules than the laws of physics themselves. If this sounds like science fiction, that's because it is, but it is also the object of serious scientific and philosophical speculation. Some physicists and philosophers maintain that the so-called difficult problem of conscience, that is to say, how objective experience arises from physical processes, could be better approached by turning the question around completely. Instead of asking ourselves how matter gives rise to the mind, we ask ourselves how the mind gives rise to matter. If conscience is primary, then perhaps what we call reality is a kind of projection or representation constructed moment to moment by the conscience that interacts with information patterns. This does not mean that we live in a simulation in the traditional science fiction sense, with a giant supercomputer and an external programmer. That is a possibility, without a doubt, but the broadest vision suggests that all reality works like a simulation by virtue of its structure, not its origin, in the same way that a video game can represent entire worlds through rules and variables. Our universe could work on a substrate we cannot perceive, something as abstract and fundamental as logic itself. Let's take quantum mechanics. One of its most disconcerting characteristics is the idea that particles exist in a superposition of states until observed. It is as if the universe conserves processing power and represents only the pixels that you see, like a video game that does not bother to load distant terrains until your character gets close enough. Could this be proof of a virtual reality framework? Some think yes. others argue is simply an artifact of an erroneous interpretation. Even so, the parallels are disturbing. This concept also relates to deeper questions about space and time. Some theories suggest that space is quantified, which means that there exists a smallest possible unit of length, just like the pixels on a screen. Time could also be quantified, a cosmic frame rate. If this is true, then reality is not continuous, but updated in discrete fragments processed sequentially, like frames of an animation. The implications are amazing. Everything we see, touch, taste, and feel could be an illusion. A convincing illusion, yes, but an illusion after all. Some defenders point to our mathematical universe as proof that the physical world, when studied carefully, seems to follow elegant abstract patterns. Gravity obeys the laws of the inverse square, and electrons and photons follow wave functions. Why is the universe so precisely describable by mathematics? Perhaps because it is. Mathematics. Reality may not only be described by mathematics, but be mathematics developing in time, like the execution of an algorithm. And here is the twist. If reality is virtual, then perhaps our experience is not happening in the universe at all. Perhaps our conscience exists outside time and space and accesses this simulation like a player starting a session in a game. This does not necessarily prove or refute the existence of a superior power, but it reopens the door to ideas considered for a long time metaphysical or spiritual. If our interior lives are not emergent properties of the flesh and the neurons, but rather the true seat of the experience, then physical reality could be only the interface. The question then is who or what is executing the simulation? Is it an alien civilization in a distant future simulating its ancestors? Is it an artificial intelligence examining possibilities? Or is the simulation simply a structure that exists by itself, a mathematical inevitability arising wherever logic is possible? We do not know it, and perhaps we will never know it. But in a virtual reality, the border between the dream and the awakened life, between the truth and the illusion, between the simulation and the source, everything begins to blur. Imagine that you're sitting in silence, with your eyes closed, lost in your thoughts, perhaps remembering a memory, or simply feeling the soft buzzing of being alive. There's something undeniably intimate in this experience. You're not only a set of organs that process information, you are experiencing, you are aware that there is something of what it is to be you. This is conscience. Now, the hard problem of conscience asks why and how all that happens. Why does a brain formed by billions of neurons firing electric signals give rise to sensations? Why is it not simply a dark mechanical system without interior life? Why are we not philosophical zombies, beings that behave like humans but do not have subjective experience? But before resolving the difficult problem, let's take a step back. There's another question that we must ask ourselves. Why does it seem that a difficult problem exists? That is the meta-problem of conscience, coined by philosopher David Chalmers, the same thinker who posed the hard problem to us. The meta-problem asks why human beings describe conscience as something mysterious in the first place. Why we say things like, I feel that there is something more in me than only biology, or that I cannot explain how red feels even though I know how color vision works. What cognitive processes make us believe there is a mystery here? And why do we resist so intuitively the idea that conscience can be completely explained in material terms? It is a subtle but powerful change, instead of immediately assuming that conscience is metaphysically special. The meta-problem invites us to examine why we say that it is. It is the study of why we speak, act, and think as if conscience were an enigma. For example, suppose we construct a robot that can describe its own experiences in great detail. It says things like, I am aware of myself, or I feel pain. Would we assume that it is really aware or that it is only programmed to say that it is? And what about ourselves? Could it be that our own affirmations about subjective experience are only the result of specific cerebral functions, not because there is something magical, but because nature has molded us to speak like that? One line of thought says that the brain constructs models of the world, including a model of ourselves, and that model of self includes, I am aware. It is only part of how the brain organizes its understanding of itself. From this point of view, consciousness feels special because our brains are designed to treat it that way, not because it is truly special in some metaphysical way. So maybe the mystery is not that there's a ghost in the machine, but that the machine insists there is one. And if we could explain that, if we could solve the meta problem, would the hard problem still be difficult, or would it fade like a magic trick that we finally understand? Let's imagine a future in which humanity develops the technology to radically increase the intelligence of animals, granting them not only problem-solving skills, but also full awareness, self-awareness, language, and even the ability to participate in society. It is not just about making a chimpanzee smarter or teaching tricks to a dolphin, but about a complete cognitive elevation that turns other species into sentient beings with rights, desires, goals, and inner lives as rich as our own. Let's say we start with primates. A team of scientists elevates a group of bonobos. In a few years, these elevated bonobos write poetry, learn history, form governments, and even express opinions about their treatment during the elevation process itself. Some of them are grateful, and others are angry. One asks, why didn't you ask us first? Here is the fundamental dilemma. If the animals have never given their consent to the elevation, is it moral to impose consciousness on them? After all, with intelligence comes suffering, existential fear, pain, loneliness, regret. Have we improved their lives? Or have we simply increased the number of ways they can suffer? On the other hand, if we have the means to elevate animals and decide not to, are we morally responsible for leaving billions of sentient beings in a state of ignorance and vulnerability? If pigs, dogs, and whales could become conscious moral agents, wouldn't it then be a form of negligence not to elevate them? And then there is the question of equality. Should elevated animals have human rights? Should they vote, marry, or own property? Can a gorilla be a lawyer, a dolphin a politician? Or will there always be a dividing line between naturally born humans and elevated minds? This also forces us to reflect on what makes us human in the first place. If intelligence, morality, and culture can be granted through bioengineering or neurotechnology, then are we just animals who have been lucky with a cognitive improvement? And if that is true, what does that say about the way we currently treat beings who have not yet crossed that threshold? Now imagine these enhanced beings, elephants, parrots, octopuses, sitting in front of you in a court or writing their own stories or protesting for their rights. Will we listen to them? Interspecies enhancement not only challenges our ethics, but also our sense of superiority, our place in nature, and our willingness to share power with minds that are nothing like our own, but that one day could think as deeply or even more so. Imagine someone says there is no truth. If that statement is true, then it is false because it claims that something is true, namely that nothing is. This is a classic example of a self-destructive belief, a statement or idea that collapses under its own logic. Self-destructive beliefs do not only exist in abstract philosophy, but appear in politics, religion, science, and even in casual conversations. For example, someone could say that beliefs should not be imposed on others, while at the same time imposing that same belief, or that all knowledge is subjective, which is stated as an objective truth. A famous case is the claim that we cannot know anything for sure. If you know it for sure, you contradict yourself, and if you don't know it for sure, then maybe we can know some things for sure. Here's another. Nothing matters, but if nothing matters, then the belief that nothing matters doesn't matter either. So why say it? Why defend it? The moment you care about sharing the idea, you are acting as if it matters. These beliefs devour themselves from within, resembling logical black holes, ideas that, once taken seriously, collapse the very framework on which they are based. But not all self-destructive beliefs are obviously false. Some are convincing at first glance until they are analyzed more deeply. For example, morality is just a social construct which seems like a useful idea, but if you follow it to the letter, you start to treat all ethical ideas as equally arbitrary, which can paralyze moral judgment. If everything is just social conditioning, then any effort to prove that society is also just conditioning, why bother? Or take epistemic relativism, the idea that all forms of knowledge are equally valid, which sounds inclusive, even liberating, but what happens when two points of view directly contradict each other? Can both be correct? And is the belief in relativism itself just another form of knowledge, no better than any other? The moment someone defends relativism with passion, they act as if it were objectively true, which is precisely what that belief denies. This is where the tension lies. A self-destructive belief does not have to seem false. In fact, many people hold it without realizing the contradiction. Sometimes it comes from humility, like the idea that we can never truly understand the universe, which may seem reasonable, even poetic, but if taken absolutely, it implies that something deep and true about the nature of knowledge is understood, which is precisely what is denied. These beliefs are not just philosophical enigmas, but they influence real-world thinking and can lead to cynicism, apathy, or inaction. If you believe that all values are illusions, or that all narratives are equally false, what is the point of believing in anything? And yet, even those who adopt such views tend to live, act, and speak in ways that suggest that meaning, value, and truth are still important to them. Here is the twist. Recognizing a belief as self-destructive does not mean that we should discard it completely. Sometimes these beliefs point to important limitations. In our thinking, they warn us not to be too confident. They remind us that knowledge is complex, that morality has nuances, and that language has limits. The key is not to take them as absolute statements, but as warning signs, reminders that the truth may be more subtle than a single sentence can express. Counterproductive beliefs are like philosophical mirrors. They show us how easy it is for our ideas to turn against us. They challenge us to think more carefully about the assumptions underlying our assumptions, and sometimes they point us to more coherent and resilient ways of thinking, not by offering perfect certainty, but by showing us where the ground we walk on is weakest. Imagine you are offered two options. You can have $100 right now, or $110 if you wait a month. Many people would choose the $100 instantly, although waiting a few weeks would give them more money. Now, imagine the same choice, but move to the future, $100 in a year or $110 in a year and a month. Suddenly, more people are willing to wait that extra month for a greater reward. The choice is the same. Wait 30 days to earn $10 more, but we treat it differently depending on when the reward is available. This is called hyperbolic discounting and describes how our brain tends to irrationally favor immediate rewards over larger ones obtained later. In essence, hyperbolic discounting is a bias in how we perceive value over time. We think in straight lines when it comes to time and rewards. Instead, our value curve leans strongly toward the present. We discount the future sharply and inconsistently. This means that we can plan to exercise, save money, or eat healthy starting next week. But when that week arrives, the present moment seems more important than the long-term benefit. So we postpone, overspend, indulge ourselves. Our present self takes priority, and our future self becomes someone else's problem. What makes hyperbolic discounting especially complicated is that it seems very reasonable at the moment you say to yourself, "I'll eat this cake now, and tomorrow I'll get back to the routine." But when tomorrow becomes today, the cake still seems better than the abstract concept of good health. And so, each present moment hijacks the plan you made from afar. Your short-term desires keep winning small battles, and your long-term goals keep losing the war. It's not just about desserts or money, but it determines how people make decisions about education, relationships, climate change, and even addiction. The costs or benefits that are in the distant future seem more diffuse and less convincing than what we want right now. Hyperbolic discounting has been linked to impulsivity and problems with self-control. That's why we can neglect saving for retirement, even though we know it's important. That's why we often favor policies with immediate benefits, even if they lead to long-term damage. Interestingly, the further away something is in time, the more willing we are to weigh it evenly. The difference between 1 and 2 years seems less important than the difference between now and tomorrow. Our irrationality is not limited to time, but to proximity to the present. It is a kind of tunnel vision in which the future fades quickly, but unevenly as it gets further away. Some researchers believe that this trend evolved as a survival mechanism in a world of uncertainty, scarce resources, and unpredictable threats. It made sense to prioritize immediate rewards. A meal today was worth more than the promise of a meal in a week. But in today's world, where long-term planning is often essential, this ancient instinct can sabotage our best intentions. There are strategies to counteract hyperbolic discounting, such as commitment devices, tools that force you to fulfill your future commitments. It can also help to rethink how you think about time. Instead of imagining your future self as a stranger, you could try to connect emotionally with him, treating him as the continuation of who you are now. Applications, planners, accountability partners. All these tools can serve as extensions of your rational mind, helping you protect your future self from the whims of the present. But at its core, there is a silent tension, the continuous negotiation between who you are now and who you want to be later. Hyperbolic discounting is not just a matter of decision-making. It is a window into the conflict between impulse and intention, pleasure and purpose, the present and the future, and recognizing that pattern is the first step to doing something about it. Imagine waking up on a distant planet. The sky is purple, the air smells slightly of ozone, and everything is disturbingly quiet. As you explore, you begin to notice something strange. All the people you meet are you, not just people who look like you. They are you, down to the smallest detail. Memories, personality quirks, and emotional baggage. They talk like you, laugh like you, dream like you. A planet populated entirely by perfect clones of yourself. At first it's fun. The conversations are easy. Everyone understands your references, shares your values, understands your jokes. But then decisions have to be made. Who is going to lead? Who is going to do the hard work? Who is going to clean the bathrooms? And who is going to design the future? There is no diversity of opinions, no new perspectives. Each discussion becomes a dead end. Each committee is only you debating with yourself endlessly. Resources are limited. Housing, food, time. You all want the best possible life. But can you prioritize yourselves above yourselves? One day a vote is held, and all the clones can vote on who should live in the luxury apartments being built near Del Equatorial. You run as a candidate, but so does everyone else. You begin to wonder if your clones still feel like you. One of them, acting like a martyr, rejects any comfort and volunteers for the mines. Another, charismatic and ruthless, campaigns hard, manipulates others, and wins the election. Are you like that? Would you have done the same in his place? Or did something change? Over time, tensions rise, alliances form, factions divide. Some of your clones argue that not all copies are really the same, that small environmental factors have made some more worthy, nobler. Others argue that this is a heresy, that after all you are all one soul, a single self, but when the clone that stole your first kiss votes in favor of exiling another clone that hoards food, you begin to feel that you are seeing strangers. So here is the question. In a world where everyone is you, who has priority? Would you treat your clones as you treat yourself? Or would you discover that your self-esteem depends on being slightly better than others? If you're forced to compete with yourself repeatedly, could you maintain the illusion of individuality? Imagine a world that prospers thanks to constant economic expansion. More production, more consumption, more growth forever. Each year, the economy grows a bit more, generating wealth. Innovation, employment, and progress. It is the engine that drives much of modern society. But here is the mental experiment. Can an economy grow forever? And if it could, should it? At first glance, eternal growth seems ideal. New technologies emerge, poverty is reduced, medicine advances, and life improves. A growing economy can finance education, science, exploration, and infrastructure. Progress seems to depend on that upward trajectory. But now imagine the planet in 1,000 years. All the trees are optimized, all the oceans exploited, every square meter developed. The raw materials of the earth are limited, the human body and mind are limited, even time and attention are finite. So how does growth continue? Where are we headed when every natural limit is reached? Advocates of eternal growth argue that we will innovate our way out of scarcity. Instead of more physical things, growth will shift to data, virtual worlds, and artificial intelligence. Value will be created and entire economies could function thanks to computing, with value measured in creativity, complexity, or awareness. If we become post-physical beings, perhaps growth will no longer be linked to Earth, but critics warn that this vision is a fantasy that masks serious problems. The pursuit of infinite growth, even in abstract forms, can continue to generate inequality, excessive consumption, and exhaustion. What happens when the demand for more clashes with what it means to be human? Do we continue to grow, or are we simply accelerating towards collapse? And then there's the ethical question. Even if eternal growth were possible, is it desirable? Should humanity always aspire to more? Or is there virtue in enough? A society focused on sustainability, balance, and inner development could be very different from one driven by constant expansion. Now imagine that you are given the opportunity to shape the economy of the future. You can choose one of two paths. One leads to infinite growth driven by artificial intelligence, virtual experiences, and endless innovation. The other prioritizes well-being, equity, and ecological balance, but accepts that growth must stop. Which would you choose, and which would your descendants appreciate? Or is that not the right question? Perhaps the true reflection is not about choosing between growth and limits, but about completely redefining the meaning of growth. What if growth no longer meant producing more, but being wiser, kinder, more aware? Could that be a future worth aspiring to? Or would even that end up reaching its limit? Imagine a library that contains all the books that could be written, all the combinations of letters, all the arrangements of words, both with and without meaning. Somewhere on its infinite shelves, there is a book that tells your life in detail. What you did yesterday, what you will do tomorrow, even how you will die. But for every true book, there are billions full of nonsense, gibberish, half-truths, lies that differ in a single word, and there is no way to distinguish one from another. In the Library of Babel of Le Borch, this infinite archive becomes a symbol of knowledge, madness, and meaning. Some of those who seek it go mad. Others adore certain books. Others burn those they believe are false. Everyone seeks the truth in a place where the truth is lost in an ocean of possibilities. If everything that can be written already exists somewhere, does originality exist? Is meaning something we find or something we contribute? In the end, the library is not just about books. It is about us, about how we search, what we choose to believe, and what we decide matters in a universe where all the answers are buried in infinite noise. Imagine a future where consciousness can be uploaded, where the human mind, with all its memories, preferences, peculiarities, emotions, and inner life, can be digitized and transferred to a virtual environment. You die in the physical world, but your mind continues uninterrupted in a simulated paradise designed to your ideal specifications. This is not a dream or metaphor, but a technological reality. You pass through the doors of a new world, not the metaphorical gates of paradise, but digital code, immaculate architecture, infinite possibilities. Everything seems real. The sun is warm, the breeze soft, your body perfect, the pain non-existent, and the people you love, whether reconstructed from memory, scanned from their own data, or purely synthetic, are there with you. At first, it seems like heaven. All desires can be fulfilled. You can fly if you want. You can relive your happiest memories. You can build a world with the rules you choose. You never age. You never suffer. But questions begin to arise. If your consciousness is just a stream of data, a copy of your biological self, are you really here? Are you you, or just a simulation that believes it is you? And if your physical self has died, does the continuity of memory really preserve the continuity of the self? There is also the problem of eternity. In a world where there is no struggle, where needs are always met, where perfection is infinite, can there still be meaning? Would you become insensitive to joy if time were infinite? Would the achievements lose their value? And if you wanted to leave, truly end everything, would the system let you? Worse still, who is running the system? Do human descendants maintain it? An AI that now acts as God? And what if it fails? And what if it restarts you unknowingly? What if a superior layer of reality, a superior being, or an intelligence observes how this heaven develops? And what about justice then? If digital heaven exists for those who can afford it, is that fair? Would the rich achieve eternal happiness while billions die forever? Should access to eternal life be a product to buy? Imagine you're on the edge of a cliff looking down at a small town in a valley. From your privileged position, you can see everything: a robbery at a gas station, a car accident about to happen, a person crying alone on a bench. You can see the lives of strangers unfolding in real time, but you're too far away to intervene. You cannot shout. You cannot go down in time. You are physically powerless, but now imagine this. You're not on a cliff. You're on the internet, or you're watching the news, or you're reading about suffering, injustice, tragedy. You can act in small ways, share something, donate, raise awareness, vote differently, but in most cases you don't, or at least not enough. Most of us do not. We scroll, we feel bad, and move on. So the question is, what's the ethical responsibility of the spectator? There's something psychologically comfortable in believing that morality is based primarily on what we do. We hold people accountable for their actions. We praise good deeds and condemn bad ones. But what if morality also applies to what we see, to what we witness, and to what we decide to do or not do as spectators? In ancient times, people saw gladiators killing each other for fun. They were just spectators, but they allowed violence. Today, when we see injustice, cruelty, and suffering from a distance through screens, stories, and reports, are we complicit in the same way? Does the moral weight change simply because we are not physically there? Some philosophers argue that mere observation carries ethical weight, that once we know something, we inherit a moral burden. Others object and suggest that morality requires action, not just awareness. If you see someone drowning on television, it is tragic, but it is not your fault. You have not put him there, you have not passed by him on the shore. But let's go further. Let's imagine a world in which millions of people suffer in poverty, in war zones, in regions devastated by disasters, and we see it daily on our phones, which vibrate with images and headlines. We look, maybe we cry, maybe we comment, but we don't act in a sustained or meaningful way. Are we slowly becoming morally numb? Does passive observation eventually become its own kind of damage? What if the simple act of looking, of observing, encourages the damage to continue? What if the systems that generate suffering thrive on attention, visits, shares? What if being a spectator is not neutral, but part of the engine? The ethical spectator is not just someone who sees, it is someone who chooses how to see, with empathy or detachment, with commitment or apathy, with a sense of duty or indifference. The disturbing question is this: are we doing enough, not only when we act, but when we observe? And if not, how much of the world's pain persists not because of evil people doing evil things, but because of billions of good people who watch and do nothing? Imagine future civilizations with immense computing power that run countless simulations, entire worlds full of conscious beings who have no idea that they are being simulated. If it is possible to simulate reality, and it is easy to do, then simulated worlds would outnumber the original real world. Now, let's take that a step further. What if those simulated beings created their own simulations? We would get simulations within simulations, a nesting of realities, each believing it is the base. Statistically, it is much more likely that we are in one of those countless lower layers than the original. In such a nested structure, the laws of physics, the constants of nature, even the idea of morality could simply be code inherited from higher layers. What we consider truth could simply be a setting chosen by someone else. Some speculate that realizing that you are in a simulation could trigger its end or its next phase. But what if there is no end? What if there is no base reality, just an infinite stack of dreams within dreams. If that is the case, the question is not whether you are real, but whether your reality needs to be real for your experiences to matter. Imagine you're looking at a tree. You see its branches, its leaves, its bark. You label it as a tree. You see yourself as something separate from it. You are the observer. It is the observed, but what if that separation is an illusion? Non-duality suggests that there is no fundamental division between you and the tree or anything else. The idea is that all boundaries are mental constructs. Even the idea of the self is just another label like tree. When you eliminate those labels, what remains are not two things, subject and object, but a single reality experienced differently. You may feel like a person in a world of other people, places, and things, but look closely at your thoughts, sensations, perceptions. They all arise in consciousness, and that same consciousness is not something you have. It is what you are. From this perspective, there is no separate self observing the world. There is only the world unfolding, only consciousness appearing as everything in the non-dual vision. The idea that you are separate from life is like a wave that believes it's separate from the ocean. You are not in the universe. You are the universe experiencing itself, moment to moment, illusion to illusion, until even the illusion of separation dissolves into a future in which reincarnation is a proven and measurable process. Society has adopted a radical form of moral responsibility. Each individual, upon dying, is reborn into a life shaped directly by the actions they performed in their previous existence. Those who oppressed are reborn as oppressed. Those who ignored suffering are reborn in suffering. Each act of kindness or cruelty becomes the architecture of their next life. This system, known as cosmic justice, is not based on punishment, but on understanding you do not suffer. Because you were bad, you live what you made others live. Over time, society begins to change. People are kinder and more empathetic, not out of fear of punishment, but because they know that one day they will experience the world through the eyes of those they affect. But a disturbing question arises: if everyone is born into roles based on past actions, where does the first injustice come from? Was there an original sin, a first oppressor? Or does the system repeat eternally, with everyone endlessly recycling their acts throughout time? And if so, is true moral progress possible? Or are we simply taking turns in an eternal echo of suffering and redemption? Antinatalism is the view that bringing a new life into existence is morally wrong, or at least ethically questionable. One of its central, most famous arguments, put forward by philosopher David Benatar, suggests that coming into the world is always a harm. The reasoning is as follows: if you're not born, you do not suffer. If you are born, you will inevitably suffer through pain, loss, fear, or death. Although life may contain joy, the absence of pleasure is not bad without anyone missing it. But the presence of suffering is always bad for the person who experiences it. So by creating a new person, you expose them to a harm that they would otherwise never have suffered. So not having children can be considered an act of compassion, not because life is always terrible, but because no life avoids suffering and no one is harmed by not existing. It is a deeply controversial vision that challenges our assumptions about the value of life and the morality of reproduction. The single simulation theory suggests that instead of countless simulated minds existing in many possible virtual worlds, there's only one true conscious mind that experiences all simulations sequentially or in parallel, but without realizing it. Every life that you live, every world in which you awaken, every scenario you experience, whether as a human, alien, AI, or something unrecognizable, is just another simulation played by the same consciousness, yours. Every time you die or disconnect from a simulation, you immediately wake up in another without memory of the previous one, trapped in an infinite loop of experiences. You believe you are a unique individual among many, but in reality, you're the only one who experiences endlessly recycled, reliving infinite lives and infinite realities. The illusion of multiplicity hides the unity behind all perspectives. Everyone you meet is you with a different mask, unaware of the cycle. What if causality didn't really exist? We think of the world as a chain of causes and effects. You flip a switch and it turns on really exists? We think of the world as a chain of causes and effects. You flip a switch and the light comes on. You push a glass and it falls. Each moment seems to follow the previous one. But some philosophers and physicists have wondered if this connection is real or just something we impose on the world to make sense of it. David Hume argued that we never really observe causality. We only see sequences. One thing happens and then another. We see patterns, but the necessary connection between cause and effect is something that our mind adds, not something we see. In quantum mechanics, things get even stranger. Events may appear correlated without a clear direction of causality. Some interpretations of quantum physics suggest that causality could be emergent, something that only appears when enough complexity arises, not a basic rule of the universe. Now imagine a universe where events simply are, where one thing does not cause another, where everything exists in a network of relationships, but there is no arrow, no sequence, no direction, where things happen together, not because of each other. If that is true, then even your thoughts, the sense of intention, decision, and consequence are just patterns that unfold. There is no true cause behind them. They arise, appear, and fade like everything else. If nothing really causes anything, what about responsibility, science, meaning? Would we continue to seek explanations in a world that does not owe us anything? Or will we finally stand still in a reality that simply is, without asking why? Imagine that what you call you, your sense of self, your ego, your identity, is not a thing, but a process, a story that the brain tells itself to organize thoughts, memories, and sensations. You're not the thinker of the thoughts, but the thoughts themselves. You're not the one who experiences, but the experience. There is no central eye that observes the world, only neurons that fire perceptions, emotions that arise and pass like clouds. The self is not a core. It is a narrative constantly rewritten, reinterpreted, remixed by biology and context. When searched for directly, the self disappears. There is no one at home, only consciousness watching itself dance in a hall of mirrors. So, if there is no true you inside your mind, who is asking the question? Imagine that everything you have experienced, every sight, sound, touch, memory, and thought, is not caused by a physical world outside your mind, but is generated by your mind, not in a delusional sense, but as a fundamental truth. The idea that reality itself is in its essence mental, not material. This is idealism. According to this view, the physical world exists independently of perception. Your desk, your body, even the stars in the sky, only exist as experiences, patterns of sensations and thoughts that occur within consciousness. There is no matter out there, only the mind and the content of the mind. Some versions say that only your mind exists. Others suggest a kind of shared or universal mind in which we all exist as thoughts in a greater consciousness. In any case, idealism challenges one of our deepest assumptions, that reality is made of things and that we are mere observers. Instead, it says that reality is made of experiences and that we are what experiences are made of. Imagine you are sitting alone in your room, thinking about everything you see, hear, and feel. Your walls, your body, the light from outside. Everything is processed through your mind. But how do you know that there is anything beyond your own mind? Solipsism is the thought experiment that asks, what if you were the only conscious being in the universe? What if everyone else, your friends, your family, even this video, were simply part of a creation of your mind? From your perspective, you could never really get out of your own experience to confirm that there is anything else conscious. Others may behave as if they have thoughts and feelings, but the only thing you really know is your own consciousness. It is not just skepticism about the world, it is a type of radical isolation. The more you think about it, the more disturbing it becomes. Every smile you have seen, every voice you have heard, could just be echoes in your own mind. And yet, if solipsism were true, would it matter? Wouldn't you still love, suffer, hope the same? You have seen, every voice you have heard may just be echoes in your own mind, and yet if solipsism were true, would it matter? Would you not continue loving, suffering, waiting just the same? And what if you could trust nothing, not even your senses, nor your memories, not even your own thoughts? That is the essence of radical skepticism. It asks, how can you really know something? Maybe you are dreaming now. Maybe an all-powerful demon is feeding you false experiences. Maybe your memories are invented. You think you are sitting in a room looking at a screen. But are you sure? Every time you try to ground your beliefs, I see it, I hear it, I remember it. Radical skepticism leaves you without ground under your feet. The senses can deceive, thoughts can be confused, beliefs can be wrong. Even reasoning itself can be flawed. You will say, but I am thinking, I must exist, but even that could be an illusion. What if the self you believe in is just another mistaken impression? Radical skepticism does not give answers. It questions the very foundations of knowledge, not to paralyze us, but to remind us that certainty could be a luxury that we can never afford. You start to notice something strange every time you concentrate intensely on an object, a person, or an idea. It changes slightly to adapt to your expectations. At first, it is subtle. A friend looks a little more like how you imagine them. A memory changes to seem more justified. Over time, it becomes undeniable. The deeper your attention, the more reality adapts to you. You do experiments, you test your environment, you try to observe without prejudice, but no matter how hard you try, your active gaze shapes what you see. Then you realize that there is no vision from nowhere. Everything you experience is filtered through the prism of your assumptions, your history, your mind. Objective reality moves further away the more you chase it. Even the questions you ask are shaped by who you are. You try to observe the truth, but you're always looking through yourself. In the end, you stop asking yourself what the world really is, and you start asking yourself a more disturbing question. If I can never escape my own perspective, how do I know if there's a world beyond it? The end of thought is the point at which the mind faces its own limits. It is not a paradox, a contradiction, or a mental trick. It is the understanding that some truths cannot be expressed in words because language itself is a filter, a structure that distorts what it tries to describe. Here, thought becomes a snake biting its tail, an infinite loop of reflection that does not lead to understanding, but to silence. You try to understand the ultimate, only to discover that the very act of understanding is the problem. You realize that every question you ask already shapes the answer you are authorized to receive, that your mind, however brilliant it may be, is not the source of truth, but a lens with cracks, and at this moment there is no need to solve, explain, or even think. There is only awareness, beyond that there is only being. Imagine a morality so vast, so all-encompassing, that it makes our usual ideas of good and evil seem like scribbles on the first page of a book that we have not yet begun to read. This is the realm of metamorality, the attempt to go outside morality itself and look at it as a whole, without asking what is right or wrong, but what it means for something to be right or wrong in the first place. In our daily lives, we debate ethics as if we were working within a shared moral operating system. Should we tell the truth? Should we lie to protect someone? Should we save one person or 5? But metamorality is not about choosing between options on a menu. It is about questioning the menu, the restaurant, the very concept of food. Imagine encountering a civilization billions of years older than ours, which does not even use the concept of harm or justice, but something completely different. Their idea of moral action could be based on principles that we cannot even perceive, such as harmonizing with quantum fields or configuring flows of consciousness through dimensions. At first, their behavior seems horrible or incomprehensible, but what if the discomfort does not come from their mistake, but from our limited perspective? Is morality something we invent or something we discover? Is it more of a personal preference or like mathematics, with answers that are true regardless of whether someone believes them or not? And if there is a moral truth, what kind of mind would it take to understand it? Metamorality also asks whether the human brain, a product of evolution, culture, and accidents, is even capable of perceiving the deepest moral truths. A dog cannot understand algebra. Could it be that we cannot understand ethics in all its dimensions? Or perhaps, what is more disturbing, what if there is no ultimate truth? Definitive moral truth? What if morality is a useful fiction, a tool for survival and cooperation, but not something rooted in the fabric of the universe? That would mean that even our highest ideals, justice, compassion, and dignity, are just beautifully written lines in a story we tell ourselves. But what if there is a level beyond even that? A morality so deep that it transcends language, logic, and culture, one that cannot be taught, only realized, a kind of moral awakening in which good and evil cease to be categories by which to judge and begin in vibrations of being itself. From this point of view, the deepest morality is not about actions or results, but about alignment with something eternal, be it called consciousness, truth, or even love. And maybe, just maybe, to see that level of morality clearly, it would not be enough to change your mind, but you would have to change what it means to be yourself, because at the highest levels, morality might not be about what you do, but about what you are.